Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku went on a pirate journey? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
I haven't earned the right to face that blade yet. Hawkeye's face flashed with something like pride and then disappeared. I know. I cannot spare you a second time. I have no intention of dying here. For the sake of my captain, I will win. Roronoa pulled out his other blades and clenched Wado Ichimonji between his teeth. After glancing over them, Hawkeye remarked, I hope you don't think those new swords will change anything. I would face you with our shitty cook's butter knives if I had to. The world's greatest swordsman can't rely only on the strength of his blade. Well said. Hawkeye then slashed, and despite making a deep cut into the ground, Roronoa Zoro charged around the blow fearlessly. Bartholomew raised both hands and bowed his head solemnly, saying, I hope you have made peace with yourself, Sanji of the Straw Hats. I have strict orders not to allow you to escape. Sanji stretched his legs and tsked. Like hell I'm going down when the captain's counting on me, bring it. Where Sanji had stood, an energy field in the shape of a paw stamped into the earth. The cook jumped, spinning around in midair, and slammed his foot right into Bartholomew's nose. His face's unforgiving metal didn't move an inch. Seeing that you are too frail for this makes me sad, I apologize. Sanji. Screw you ass, the insult was cut short by a fist driven deep into his stomach. Your brother told me about you. Luffy's intensely focused expression faltered, you know Ace? Jinbei gave a nod. Fought him, before Whitebeard did. We swapped stories once Whitebeard cracked out the sake. Luffy gave his head a scratch. If you're friends with Ace, then why are you helping the Marines? I fight to protect my people, and so they may one day see the sun with their own eyes. And I fight for my crew, so they can be free and chase after their dreams and eat all the meat they want. I am sorry about this, but I cannot stand down. The best I can do is to kill you, and spare you whatever fate the Marines have planned for you. Luffy gave both legs a compressor-like squeeze. Steam rose from his body and his skin turned pink as the blood swelled through him. Gear second. Jinbei braced his arms and widened his stance. Fishman karate, water bullet. With a loud splash, Rubbery's fist collided with the water blast, and the two pirates charged through the descending fog. Izuku found that fighting Doflamingo's strings was more difficult than anything he had ever faced. The cuts along Izuku's arms and legs were sufficient evidence of the sharp edges of the thin strings, which moved slowly through the air but were almost invisible unless the light caught them properly. Even with Izuku's back to the lowering sun, it was difficult to distinguish the strings because they were glowing in various shades. While the yellow and orange strings slithered along the ground, blending in with the warmly colored sand and stones, the blue strings attacked him from the air, only emerging against the backdrop of a malnourished cloud. The more flamboyant red, purple, and green threads served as good diversion from the more subdued hues, frequently luring him into the line of a covert assault. After shedding the heavy rags, Izuku's body drifted along the sand, although he had a few near misses. The few times he had to Geppo out of a trap, each hop carried him farther and faster than usual, and each Soru felt like a dance of lightning along the sands. When the thinner strings didn't work, Doflamingo switched strategies. Like a python, the strings coiled into a thick whip that shattered through the air, tearing biting gouges out of the rock. The whips were always just a glance behind Izuku as he and Soru ran across the field. The sound of the pursuit across the battlefield was like thunderclaps in a storm. Izuku resisted the urge to use the power that was churning inside of him. His gaze strayed to his fellow pirates engaged in their own fierce combat and to the rebels putting up a valiant fight against the more skilled and well-armed Marines. He was able to cut loose. Perhaps he could stop the warlords and the Marines by himself. Izuku wasn't sure he could stop himself, though. Memories of Whiskey Peaks were evoked by the roar of cannon fire, the sound of tents collapsing into ripped sheets and splintered timber, and the bodies scattered throughout the field. Izuku wondered if any of those were his fault. His mind was tickled by a tiny whisper of caution. Izuku leaned back and felt the coiled string nick his electrified ear, causing his very electrons to freeze. If he hadn't moved, the hockey tip would have pierced his eyeball. Doflamingo shook his head and tsked smugly. Getting distracted, little pirate? Come on. I heard from Croaky Boy about what you did to his little numbers. A whole island, smashed to rubble by a single boy. Thrilling stuff. Makes me wish I was there to enjoy the show. Izuku's face must have displayed some of his uneasiness despite his best efforts to hide it. Doflamingo smiled and arched an eyebrow. Oh, are you, perhaps, afraid of your power? Izuku remained silent, but Doflamingo didn't need an answer from him. With a tittering giggle, the warlord started. His laughter burst forth, turning into a maniacal laugh that made the marines around him look at him suspiciously. Doflamingo wiped an imaginary tear from his eye before striking with a flurry of strings. All that power, and you're not using it because you're too afraid to hurt anybody? That is absolutely hilarious. I haven't laughed that hard since I made that one king kill his own people. Izuku dodged and continued to run while Doflamingo intensified his attack. Morons like you, Doflamingo sighed as he cut the ground. Get to die horrible, screaming deaths for my amusement. Do you want to know why? It's because the people who control the world, who decide the rules, who say what justice is, they're the ones that have power and aren't afraid to use it to ruthlessly crush anyone else who would say otherwise. Izuku flashed with anger. His words, "You're wrong," caused sparks to fly out of him. Doflamingo laughed heartily. You're a pirate. I thought you'd know better. Or do you really think the Marines are the bastion of justice they pretend to be? Izuku gave a headshake. I come from a place where everything works differently. The government there was made by the people, for the people, to protect everyone from villains like you. Oh really? Inquired Doflamingo. Sounds like I ought to pay them a visit. It might make a nice vacation. The heroes would stop you. If they do, it only proves my point. Might makes right. That's the only rule in the world that matters. When Doflamingo threw out both hands, a massive web swung out in Izuku's direction. He knew from experience that no amount of Tekai could protect him from those razor-sharp strings, and the strands reached over and around him, cutting off any chance of escape with Soru or Geppo. As he looked around, he noticed the scars left by Doflamingo's earlier assaults. The ground was not carved up by the web. Izuku kicked at the dirt as the web drew nearer, its hold tighter. He could barely fit his entire body inside the improvised Rankyaku, which sliced into the rock. Could he? The idea flitted through his mind. His body trembled as its constituent electrons soared free, constrained only by the vague notion of Izuku's identity. Izuku pushed the charge deep into the rock's cleft after a whisper of intent condensed it into a dense point. He could see the thin strands pass over him, meeting like the twin halves of an iron maiden and squeezing until only a tight, tangled knot remained, even though he was a clump of electrons simmering like soup inside the ground. Izuku exhaled in relief, but his moment of calm was fleeting. A whip struck the crevice, causing stone to break and Izuku to lose his breath. Izuku rolled aside, squirming as a strand cut into his arm, and crawled out of the crater Doflamingo had created. Izuku threw out his good arm without thinking. Like a spear, an arc of thunder leapt in the direction of the warlord. Doflamingo broke the bolt into 100 shimmering sparks with a languid flick of his fingers. Come on, is that all you got? I heard you shattered buildings with those? Izuku realized he had to use his powers to win after glancing around at the carnage. Doflamingo could just wrap himself in a web of strings and allow Izuku to slit himself to death attempting to strike him if he ever attempted to approach. Although he could perform a Rankyaku, the slices were too slow and predictable to ever catch the warlord, and he needed a ranged option. Izuku sent a ripple of lightning that never stopped. After scattering the initial volley, Doflamingo used his web as a lightning rod by impaling strings into the ground as the lightning continued to strike. Izuku resumed using single bolts, threading them past the web, but the warlord responded with a barrage of string darts after Doflamingo swatted a few. Impulsively, Izuku zapped the strings out of the air and threw up a fountain of sparks. Doflamingo yawned mimingly. You're going to put me to sleep at this rate. Is this really all you could do? I suppose I wouldn't put it past that croaky boy to over-exaggerate. Marines aren't exactly going to roll out the red carpet for a couple of backwater pirates who stumbled into the Grand Line by accident, after all. Izuku clenched his jaw, but he was at a loss for what to do. He never even used this power, which he only had for a few weeks. He could barely test his devil fruit in the midst of a conflict zone, and there were no thunderclouds overhead to guide a lightning strike. Izuku took a chance and looked away to see how the fight was going, as the fishman parried Luffy's hockey-coated punches with the steady, sure-footed movements of a martial arts expert. Luffy went toe-to-toe with Jinbei. Zoro kept his three swords ready and waited silently for Mihawk's next move despite having cuts all over his body and blood seeping to the parched ground. Izuku searched but was unable to locate Sanji. He saw Bartholomew, skulking like a golem through the ranks of rebels, slamming men to the ground while they shattered swords and spears against his chest. Izuku's stomach dropped. Even though he had only known the sour cook for a few weeks, the idea of him being gone left him feeling completely numb. He noticed a shimmer of purple. A chromatic string split the air where Izuku stood, and he flung himself aside, jumping across the field like lightning. Really now, looking away from me again? I'm feeling a bit underappreciated here. Doflamingo's smile turned savage and ferocious as he made two whips simultaneously. He spun his fingers in a web dance around him. Maybe I ought to step it up a bit. Izuku Soru moved directly into the path of the second whip, avoiding the first one. Bracing himself, he took off. Rubbing at his bruised shoulder, he pulled himself up and leapt as the whip returned. He was always confronted by a snare of wires or another whip after he dodged. Izuku, who was hurried at every turn, jumped without thinking because he had run out of time. The world vanished into a vague jumble of hues, broken by a flash of insight, a glimpse of impending death speeding in his direction. Izuku threw both arms and threw lightning at the warlord, gasping for breath. Doflamingo's subsequent attack was a second slower, but the bolts were thrown aside. A second to orient himself felt like an eternity, but Izuku had become accustomed to lightning-fast bursts of thought, so the delay hardly gave him time to breathe. His gaze moved over the landscape, identifying areas where Doflamingo had not yet placed his traps. He devised a plan after searching the internet for openings through which he could insert bolts. If he moved fast enough, he could hit from several angles at once, but attacks from a single direction would be easily swatted. Izuku braced with crossed arms and took the attack head-on when the whip was used next. A moment of hesitation by Doflamingo caused the second whip that was on its way to Izuku's right to halt and turn around. Izuku blitzed aside after spitting a dazzlingly bright crackle of lightning. Spindly, incandescent spears of electricity grew in his clenched fists. To his eyes, his initial throw appeared slow, more akin to a spear than actual lightning. Izuku increased the force of the throw for the second bolt, which was directed at Doflamingo's back. At Doflamingo's side, he threw the third with all his strength. Completed in a tenth of a second, the three throws exploded in the center with a burst of static mist. For a moment, Izuku relaxed, confident that the warlord had been defeated by the attack. From the fog came 6 whips. A glancing blow to Izuku's chest knocked him to his knees as he yelled and twisted his body around the attacks. The cloud of static was broken by a flurry of strings. Doflamingo appeared to be in good condition, save for a few charred feathers from his coat. You caught me off guard with that one. Izuku took a nervous swallow. Doflamingo's voice had lost all trace of humor, and the numb rage that took its place was somehow more terrifying. That last bolt of yours damaged my coat. It's only fair if I damage something of yours, wouldn't you say? Doflamingo looked around the battleground. In defiance of his better judgment, Izuku looked after him. Roronoa and Mihawk exchanged Rankyaku slashes, and Luffy punched with a huge, hockey-coated fist. In front of him, Kuma held a barrier in the shape of a paw, blocking the dialfire from a massive scrap metal machine. Izuku blinked. Yes, that was a mech. Izuku could see the pilot's cockpit as it swiveled to the side. Mei's reticle eyes twitched in tiny, quick movements that Izuku knew indicated she was taking in every detail around her, and her hair hung limp from perspiration and oil grease. The mech swung its iron cloud sword at Kuma's legs after she pulled a lever. Let's see, Doflamingo said, gesturing toward the bloodshed. Eeny, meeny, miny. As Doflamingo's finger languidly followed Mei, Izuku's heart stopped. Giant whips coiled, poised to strike, and a volley of glittering strings spun in her direction. Mo. Izuku charged ahead, much quicker than a simple Soru. The knowledge that he had made a mistake came to him even more quickly than he had been traveling. The tightly knit web stretched before Doflamingo's body, and Izuku saw his body glowing from the plasma trailing around him. If he didn't back off, he would turn his arm into cubes fit for a sausage platter, but he could squeeze a finger through without having it cut off. However, Doflamingo would kill Mei if he backed off. Izuku thrust his arm forward like a spear, fingers outstretched in the hopeless hope of threading through an opening, determined to punch through at all costs. He touched the edge of the wire. Izuku's fingertips gave a faint pressure, and then the wire broke with the discordant twang of a broken piano string. Izuku's arm went straight for Doflamingo's chest, and the web fell limply. Izuku flew faster than lightning, but the warlord turned, tried to move, and raised more strings around him. As if his skin were made of rotten cloth, his fingers pressed against Doflamingo's chest before pushing through. Izuku attempted to stop, but his arm was forced all the way to his elbow by his own momentum. Blood splattered into the desert air as his hand exploded out of Doflamingo's back. Izuku could feel Doflamingo's heart pounding in his chest around his forearm. Izuku had to suppress a wave of vomiting as bile rose in the back of his throat. Izuku pulled his arm away and took a step back. He inhaled deeply, and the screams and gunfire in the background became a static buzz. Izuku counted out his breaths until the world returned to focus, realizing that a panic attack was imminent. Doflamingo stood, breathing in and out with a rasping, painful sound, despite the huge hole in his chest. Izuku watched as the wound's edges unraveled into tiny strings the color of flesh. The wound closes as the strings bind themselves together. Noticing that the warlord had barely lost any blood, Izuku swallowed. A peek into the hole revealed string wound around his heart, squeezing and forcing it to beat, and veins stitched shut. If I had known you had hockey, Doflamingo growled, I wouldn't have gone easy on you. You're a dead man next time I see your stupid face. Over the clamor of battle, Doflamingo yelled, Oi, Garp. I'm leaving, his chest still mending itself. Garp took a brief break from the battle to give Doflamingo a furious look. Garp's face took on a pinched look as he watched the wound knit itself together. Fine. I'll take care of the brat. Doflamingo's lips were spotted with blood when he laughed. Don't kill him. I want that pleasure for myself. Doflamingo leapt into the clouds after being pulled off the island like a marionette by strings on his arms and back. Izuku ran as Garp approached, but the Vice Admiral beat him. Izuku flew back into the rebel camp like a cannonball after a punch slammed into his back. He stumbled to his feet in the ruins of Koza's tent and saw Vivi fighting with the rebels. With idle flicks of her arms, Vice Admiral Hina strode toward her, securing groups of rebels in iron. Hina informed Vivi that royalty in cooperation with Roger's crew is unacceptable. The only way Alabasta can atone for its crimes is with your execution. Vivi's face flashed with fear and guilt. She lost all will to fight when she saw the Marine ranks, trampling on the corpses of her slain compatriots. I understand. Let the rebels go. I am the one that brought the Straw Hats here, they only went along with it because I made them. Koza looked at her in horror. Vivi, no, Garp clamped a hockey-clad hand onto Izuku's shoulder as he attempted to reach her. Don't. This is the only way Hina can spare them. Izuku attempted to startle him. Garp slammed Izuku to the ground with a grunt. Izuku could only watch as Vivi walked alone to her own execution while struggling under his iron grip. He was unable to save someone in front of him despite his immense power. Then a brown blur fell from the sky as Hina hit Vivi. Pel's wings spread out, and Hina heard the sound of his talons slamming into her. The Vice Admiral caught herself in the ranks of her men and flew back. Pel! Vivi exclaimed in shock. What have you done? I have followed my king's orders. From behind the Marines came a thunderous roar. With their spears lowered, Alabasta's royal army charged into the Marine line's exposed rear flank. The captains among the white-clad soldiers fell, shrieking, before Chaka's sword and devil fruit-enhanced power. King Cobra Nefertari, gleaming like fire in the last of the sunlight, led the charge, sword high, slicing through Marine recruits. No, father! What are you doing? Stop! Pel gave a headshake. He chose to save his people, and the army marched with him. He asked Chaka and I to see you all to Nanahara. There's enough boats there to evacuate the city and the rebels. But what about father? What about the army, princess? We will all die if we remain. I would stay, had his highness not begged me to look after you. Koza touched Vivi's arm tenderly. Please, we need to go. Vivi turned away from the fight, tears welling up in her eyes. When Koza yelled commands, the ragged rebels quickly dismantled their tents and loaded their supplies onto wagons. Keeping the Marines confined during their escape, the few rebels who were still engaged in combat organized their retreat. Izuku kicked and hooked a leg behind Garp's knee while he was preoccupied with the army's charge. Izuku had just enough wiggle room to get out of his hold and begin running when the knee gave way. Next to Izuku, on a crate, Robin's mouth appeared. We need to regroup at the Mary. May and Luffy are grabbing the others. Get moving. Izuku took a chance and looked back at the fighting armies as he made his way west, back towards the river. The remaining warlords wreaked havoc among Alabasta's lines without the Straw Hats to divert them. Hawkeye's slashes sliced down swaths of men like wheat stalks, and a battered, scorched Kuma waded through the soldiers, sending them flying. With a flick of his hand, Cobra disarmed the king and punched hard enough to crumple his chest, even though the warlord was bruised from his battle with Luffy. Izuku winced. He wanted to go back and rescue as many people as he could, but Smoker and a group of Marines were chasing the other Straw Hats. With Usopp and Luffy clinging for dear life on its arms, May's mech churned sand as it roared towards him. In the mech's enormous hands, she held Sanji and Zoro, both unconscious and wrapped in bandages, while Chopper held them steady in between. Robin rushed up beside Izuku and remarked, "Nine got the Mary ready to sail." In retrospect, she added, or worse. "We need to sail fast before they set up a blockade." After the day they had, Izuku ran faster because he didn't want to know what was worse. After seeing Mei's mech stop a warlord, nobody proposed abandoning it, even though it almost caused the Mary to topple over. Smoker stopped by the side of the river as the Mary started downstream. He frowned and bit his cigar so hard that it broke in two, but he didn't follow them any farther. Izuku gave him a silent warning to stay back by flaming his electricity. Nami whispered, "What do we do now?" Nobody knew how to respond to her. Any idea of claiming a reward had vanished at the sight of the day's battle, and Igaram and Vivi had remained with the rebels. Nanohana appeared in the distance. Crowds gathered to board each ship as ships sailed away from its docks. They watched as marine ships closed off the ship's escape by circling the sea like sharks. Luffy glared at the marines, half of his face swollen, and declared, "Sail me closer. I'm going to punch them." "Luffy, we can't. They'll tear us to shreds." Izuku's hands formed a bolt. Exhaustion wore at him and his arms felt heavy, but he threw after a far-off ship. Before it could reach the marine vessel, the bolt exploded. An even bigger thunderbolt dropped from the sky as Izuku gazed glumly at the ship. Marines flew in all directions as the ship broke in two. "Whoa!" exclaimed Usopp. "I didn't know you could do that." "That wasn't me." On the horizon, black dots began to grow. The marine ships scurried, but they were struck by lightning or cannonballs one after the other. The ships from Nanohara were drawn to their rescuers. "You survived. Good." On their ship, everyone turned to face the stranger with the tattoos. Standing behind them, Vivi and Igaram gazed anxiously at their escort. Luffy grinned and exclaimed, "Hi, Dad." Usopp's tongue choked him. "You're Dragon." Dragon's eyebrows went up. "I am. Good work helping a kingdom escape the world government's chains. If you ever want to join the revolutionaries, you'll be welcomed with open arms." Luffy's tongue protruded. "Boring. I want to be a pirate." Dragon laughed and replied, "I expected nothing less. Anyways, I came because the princess requested a final farewell before you part ways." Vivi walked tensely in front of them. "I have to apologize. I promised you a reward for your assistance, but I have nothing to give you." Luffy beckoned her away. "It's okay. Your country got ruined anyways." Nami attempted to argue about interest payments while slapping Luffy's head. The pile of berry left on the deck greatly appeased Nami, and Dragon sighed, "I have no qualms compensating you myself. It's the least I could do, for, well, leaving you with Pops." With Nanohara burning in the background, the farewells felt muted, but Izuku wished Vivi, Nine, and the others luck as they departed with Dragon. After giving Dragon and his ships a long, ambivalent glance, Robin shook her head and went below deck. The Straw Hats set sail for the next destination on their log pose, licking their wounds. Izuku narrowed his eyes and focused on the middle of the 3 glass bottles that were arranged on the railing of the Mary. After several slips and accidents that left Usopp and Nami yelling at him until Mei set up a plastic tarp to shield the area, there were scorch marks all over the wood surrounding the area. Lightning flashed across the deck as he threw. When the middle went flying, Izuku pumped his fist, but when he noticed the crack running down the right one, he stopped and sighed. Mei told him, "You're almost getting it, there's hardly any lightning shooting everywhere." "I don't know how I was doing it against Doflamingo. It wants to go everywhere when I throw it." "Well, maybe you're thinking about it too much." "But I'm not really thinking about it." Mei stared at him blankly. "Izuku, you're mumbling about air conductivity and plasma molecules under your breath." Shrugging sheepishly, Izuku remarked, "I don't know how to turn it off." "I have an idea." Mei fled with that dire warning. Izuku placed another bottle on the railing and shook himself, deciding to figure it out before Mei constructed something that might explode. He heard Mei yell, "Think fast," as he took aim, clenching his teeth tightly to prevent any evil thoughts from escaping. Izuku spun around. A glass bottle smashed directly into his face. He flicked his fingers, and a lightning bolt pierced the center, sending glass fragments flying across the deck. Mei stood behind him with a victorious smile. "See? I knew you were overthinking it. Mei, you were right behind it. What if I hit you?" Sacrifices must be made in the name of scientific progress. That doesn't mean screwdrivers are acceptable tools for propping up safety guards. Mei gave an eye roll. "Are you ever going to let that go?" "We almost died. We almost died last week, and the week before, and a month ago. You don't hear me constantly reminding you how stupid an idea it was to block bullets with your face, do you? There wasn't anything else I could do. She held up a bottle and said, try it again. Let's see if you can hit a moving target. And I didn't have anything else to prop up that Lexan guard. Izuku tagged the bottle Mei threw over the ocean. Hey Mei, aren't those full? Izuku asked, looking at the glass that was falling after he struck a few dozen bottles. Mei gave the bottles a shake. Oops. They were just lying around. I thought Zoro was done with them. Oi cook. Zoro yelled from the opposite side of the Mary, you better not have taken my booze. Piss off, mosshead. That swill you drink isn't fit for deglazing a pan. Mei and Izuku exchanged terrified glances. Mei ran after giving the bottles to Izuku. Nami. That booze you drank better lower my debt. Ew. No, you'd have to pay me to drink that. Izuku searched for a place to conceal the alcohol, but he was unable to make up his mind and ended up holding the bottles while Zoro strode into view. Luffy doesn't like the stuff, but who knows what else he might do. Chopper's just a kid, and he was whispering to himself when he suddenly looked at Izuku and the bottles he was holding. Subsequently, he looked at the charred railing and the bottles that appeared to be waiting for a firing squad. Didn't realize they were still full. Zoro snatched a bottle from Izuku's hand and chugged it, murder in his eyes. You're lucky Chopper would hound me for ripping my bandages, or I'd beat you across the deck. Izuku smiled and flashed lightning along his arms. You'd beat me? I've beaten 2 warlords. Remind me, how many have you won against? Zoro sighed and replied, oh screw you, Crocodile doesn't count, and Mihawk could take that fruity pirate whack job any day of the week. They both turned and yelled. Hey, Zoro winced as Chopper walked toward him. Your bandages will be pulled by all that yelling. Did you drink again? I told you that alcohol lowers blood pressure. Seeing his chance, Izuku put the bottles down and rushed out of the doctor's fury, heading for the wheel where Nami gazed incredulously at the log pose that hung in front of her. I don't get it, she muttered, it's pointing up more the farther we sail. Right now, I can hardly make out the heading. It swayed toward the horizon for a moment, then slowly rose back to the sky as she tapped the needle and attempted to shake it down. Look, it continues to do so. Izuku followed the needle's point, and a big cloud with rays of sunlight peeking through it loomed on the horizon. Oh, I suppose our next destination will be Skypia. A Skypie? Where is that? Luffy pointed as he swung down from the mast. In the clouds. Disregarding Luffy, Nami turned to face Izuku, who shrugged and said, in the clouds. Nami gave him a disbelieving glance before turning back to the log pose. Really? We got shot up in the sky by a giant blast of water, said Luffy. Izuku got to swim in the cloud, lucky jerk. We'll have to locate a knock-up stream, you're right. Are you aware of Roger's method? Luffy said with a head scratch, nope. Nami exhaled. Excellent. How are we going to ascend there? Jaya ought to be near, we can simply inquire there. And without a log pose reading to guide us there, how are we meant to locate Jaya? Usopp yelled from the crow's nest, Landho, dead ahead. That makes sense, Izuku remarked. Roger did mention that Jaya was the true source of the dirt up in Skypia. Centuries ago, a massive knock-up stream blasted up there. Wait, won't the log pose reset on the same island as Jaya? In that case, we wouldn't need to fly at all. Maybe, said Izuku. Nope, Luffy said, shaking his head. We're returning because I told them I would. Nami sighed and sagged over the steering wheel. Excellent. Therefore, we must figure out how to launch ourselves into the air. I'm sure we'll hear something in Jaya. Is that Sky Island? The man guffawed and slapped the bar, making the beer in his mug leap over the side. That old story? With the devil fruit, old Bellamy has been attempting to reach the top for years. There is no way. But it's up there, another man shouted, sloshing cheap booze all over himself. Why, 20 years ago, I heard it plain as dia. Never again. You tell that story every week, I promise. Shut up. Everyone who was presenta I'm not alone. Which was, like, 20 people. The drunkard's eyes filled with tears as he said, we all heard it. It was beautiful. I can still hear it, right down to my bones. So, none of you know about knock-up streams? Izuku inquired. The stream of knock-up, oh yeah, we know all about those. It's a great way to have your ship destroyed. Usopp gulped behind them. The man went on, heard that the maiden's tits hit one a few years back, and it's still raining timbers from her hull. Excellent. Is it possible to determine where one might be found? Well, that Mont Blanc fellow would probably know, the man said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully as the other men around them snickered and snorted into their beer. Resides on the opposite side of the island in that small hovel. He's spent more time than most trying to get up there, but he's never succeeded. Izuku wondered if the man had misled them when he saw the facade of a castle on the island's coast. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the castle was made of flat painted wood, with a stone shack hidden behind it. When they reached a clearing, Cricket looked up at the sky while a coil of rope was drawn toward the clouds, slackening, and he counted the knots that remained on the ground. Izuku tensed, prepared to catch the man as he fell from the sky, but the man's legs absorbed the force of the fall by stretching out like springs, and Bellamy bounced a couple of times before landing on the ground and asking, "How was that?" 500 meters. Getting better, but not nearly fast enough, Bellamy said, shaking his head. Have you given Geppo a try? Izuku inquired. Bellamy and Cricket both turned to face him. Geppo? Bellamy's eyes widened as Izuku leapt into the air to demonstrate. Is that a devil fruit? No, I'm actually jumping out of the air. Additionally, if you're jumping with your springs, I would then be hopping 500 meters each time, Bellamy concluded. Teach me, please. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. They're pirates, Cricket said, giving him a side of the head slap. Never promise anything to pirates because that's exactly what they'll take. Izuku rubbed his hair sheepishly and said, It's not that difficult, I really don't need anything from you. He looked at the straw hats and said, What can I do for you? Cricket rolled his eyes and said, Unless they're one of those kinds of pirates. It's unbelievable that you traveled this far to offer Bellamy some advice. We need help predicting when and where to catch the next knock-up stream. Yelled Cricket, Are you crazy? Initially, I thought the same thing, but the test craft I sent up was destroyed. At the stream's edge, your balance would have to be flawless. You will fall off and get smashed to splinters if you are even slightly off. The penalty is death. Luffy and I have done it before. Cricket jerked both of their eyes and said, You're Roger Pirates. I guess he's the one who's crazy enough to pull it off. Hold on. Bellamy ran to him and said, You were up there, have you noticed the bell? That enormous gold one? Luffy inquired. Bellamy and Cricket both stared at him in shock. You've seen it, Cricket let out a roar. Yes. Rang it as well, and if you were on Roger's crew, that would have been 20 years ago, Bellamy said, panting. I was a child. I was hiding in the debris, eating whatever scraps I could find as Marines tore up the island. I heard it. All of us did. My goal has been to go up there and ring it again someday ever since. Cricket added, pulling out an old storybook. I discovered the child attempting to jump up there around 10 years ago, and when I learned about the bell, well, Nolan the liar was my ancestor. The bell must have been knocked up there instead of sinking under the sea, as he had assumed. I've been attempting to ascend in order to demonstrate that my ancestor wasn't dishonest. We could take you, if you like, Izuku said, adding sheepishly, if Luffy is okay with it. Luffy nodded firmly, and Cricket grinned as he gestured them to his shack and said, You might as well settle in. Masira and Shoju will return shortly. If there were any pockets of gas forming down there, they would know better than I did. They might even assist you in achieving it. With half the crew crammed into Cricket's shack, Luffy hung like a bat from the roof, and Izuku sat on an open windowsill. They had to share teacups, but Cricket's herbal blend was so tasty that Chopper had to guess what it contained. The two pirate crews lowered their anchors right at the shoreline, as Cricket had promised, and Shoju said, There's a giant pocket just south of here, following a brief introduction. We anticipate that it will blow at any moment. According to Masira, if rumors are to be believed, it ought to be directly beneath the Sky Island. It will be an easy shot. Izuku and Luffy packed barrels full of dirt, much to the bewilderment of the other Straw Hats, and Izuku considered telling them, but Maze smiled and asked him why he should ruin the surprise. It took a few days to gather up enough barrels of gunpowder and sink them to the bottom, but the two diving specialists made sure their barrels wouldn't leak. When they set the Mary out on the ocean on a calm, windless day, bubbles frothed up in a circle just ahead of them, and Nami shaded her eyes. That's weird, she said. Did they blow them up early? A grumpy south bird, held by Cricket, pointed the way to the impending knock-up stream. Shoju yanked off his diving gear and yelled. The knock-up stream burst on its own, as he popped out of the water like a cork. Now you must move. Nami yelled commands as Shoju jumped from the ship. Izuku and Luffy jumped up to unfurl the sails. Usopp and Sanji hauled ropes into position, and the Mary sped ahead, tearing through the water as it pounded the frothing patch of sea. Water churned up over the sides as they hit the circle, and Usopp screamed in fear as the ship was pushed into the air by the rising column. "Stop staring. Get those sails furled or we'll take off immediately," yelled Nami. Usopp passed up the rope, Luffy tied them all into place, and Robin held them in place with a dozen disembodied hands, while Izuku and Luffy were far ahead of her, already having the sails closed. "Strike the oars. We must maintain the ship's equilibrium." Luffy handled the port side, and Izuku took the starboard oars. Chopper called down Nami's instructions, and Izuku swung his oar with deep, powerful strokes, pushing his body with Tekai to swing the ship where it needed to go. The whole ship shook, and as they rose higher, Izuku was afraid that the entire ship might collapse around them. He didn't recall the Oro Jackson fighting the knock-up stream, and that ship was much larger. The Mary settled with a fluffy splash into the cloud sea, scattering white foam across the deck and the weary Straw Hats. Izuku was wondering absently if they had used quirk-made wood when the rattling stopped. Vertigo set in, and for a scary moment, Izuku thought they had slipped off. Izuku ran to the top deck, prepared to jump off and carry the ship the rest of the way if he had to, but gravity returned. Zoro was sound asleep against the mast, and Sanji tried to nudge him awake with his foot, but Chopper whooped with delight and caught wisps of cloud on his tongue. Luffy joined him, and soon Usopp and May joined in the game. Nami leaning against the helm, wiping the perspiration from her brow, and Robin whispering congratulations to the navigator. They were pirates, and even pirates of their caliber didn't often make it to retirement. Izuku had witnessed his share of seaborne funerals of pirates who had fallen against marines or other crews, but it hadn't really hit home until now that they were truly gone. He watched them as his own thoughts drifted back to the Oro Jackson, to a crew that had said goodbye to him barely a month ago, and he wondered where they had all gone and if they still remembered him. With a nudge to his ribs that went through him a little, May said, "Hey." She held a huge cloud clump and said, "Chopper says this tastes like cotton candy, but I only taste water." Izuku took a clump sample. He wouldn't mistake it for tap water, but the liquid that danced across his tongue had no particular flavor, and the cloud dissolved instantly. "Maybe if we put sugar on it," Izuku was saying. Izuku must have heard Sanji's idle thought because he disappeared with a cloud clump and reappeared a few moments later with a puffy snow cone. The cloud was dense and spongy due to the flavored syrup he had prepared, and the faint flavors of lemon and mint blended in perfectly with the cloud's springy flavor. The crew drifted in sight of Skypia's tollway as they enjoyed the spontaneous snack. After showing them the toll, a wrinkly Skypian blinked at Luffy's straw hat. "Ah, Monkey D. Luffy, Hatsume Mei, and Midoriya Izuku. Gonfall said you would be coming. Your entry fee has been waived." Nami, enraged and prepared to bargain with every berry to lower their admission fee, paused and stared at Luffy. The crew sailed upstream to Skypia after Luffy laughed and thanked them. A huge group of people gathered as they got closer to the shore, arranging tables and bringing out platters of takoyaki the size of Luffy's head, bowls of roasted cloud vegetables, and skewers of steamed sky squid. Luffy paddled the ship toward shore with his own hands, drooling at the sight. "Meat!" yelled Luffy. "I smell it. Are they really rolling out the welcome mat for us?" asked Robin. "Luffy and I helped save the island, 20 years back, from Shiki the Golden Lion." Robin looked at him approvingly. "You really defeated a pirate of that caliber?" "Roger did," Izuku said softly. "We just helped fend off his crew a bit. It wasn't really a big deal." Robin turned to face the group of people gathered on the beach. They seemed to disagree. With Pierre at his side and Gonfall in his plate armor, he strode up to meet them as the Going Merry drew ashore. Gonfall said, "It is exactly as Roger said," after they had completed exchanging greetings. "The three of you look exactly the same. And you got a haircut." Gonfall laughed and surveyed the other newcomers. "And I take it these are your crew members?" "I am not," stated Cricket Mont Blanc. "They agreed to take me so I could see the bell." Gonfall's gaze expanded. "That hero, would you happen to know Mont Blanc Noland?" "Noland the liar? He's a distant ancestor of mine." Gonfall's expression dimmed. "We heard. We tried to ring the bell for him, but the bell was lost when we got blasted up here. Now that you're here, we can keep our promise from so long ago." "So everything he said was true? Every word?" Gonfall returned his focus to the Straw Hats and pointed to the tables covered with food while Cricket fought back tears. "I remember well the appetite you two had. I hope you and your friends are hungry." Luffy was determined to prove it, and the other Straw Hats followed closely behind. Following a few pints of sparkling beer, Luffy started a round of Bink's sake, and the locals taught the other Straw Hats the verses. At first, there was a tense atmosphere between the locals and the other pirates. with Zoro sneaking beer swigs while Chopper became preoccupied with desert mountains, Sanji exchanging recipes with the cooks, Nami placing bets and drinking men beneath the table, and Robin reading a book while listening to the celebrations. The awkward atmosphere surrounding the party completely vanished after a few inebriated choruses. When someone attempted to give him a shoulder clap, their hand went right through. Pagaya jumped back and yelled, shaking his hands to get rid of the numbness caused by static. Didn't expect that, lad. Were you always like that? No, it was a gift. Still in the waiver business? Of course. I'm sure May would love to see the new design I cooked up. It's even faster than the old one. Izuku's smile froze as he recalled the crazy run up the river with the last waiver he had ever been on. I'm sure May will be delighted. Konas peered out from behind Paguya and asked, Papa? Who is this? He and his friends saved the island. Izuku, this is my daughter Konas. He smiled and said, if you're thinking about settling down. Konas gave him a slap. Papa, quit teasing people. Aren't dads supposed to be keeping boys away from their daughters? Ah, but then how would I ever get any grandchildren? Konas pounded his fists gently against his back, blushing. Izuku joined Paguya in his roar of laughter. May sneaked off to Paguya's workshop as the celebration was coming to an end and emerged with the new waiver. Nami hurried to give it a try after witnessing May blitz across the waves. She quickly demonstrated her superior skill, gliding across the waves and darting between rocks like a falcon. She asked Paguya his price as soon as she returned to the dock. Izuku offered Jaya a barrel of dirt, recalling how the Roger pirates bartered and having arrived well prepared. Nami gaped in disbelief as Izuku unveiled her new waiver. That's why you brought the dirt. The Roger pirates traded dirt for gold when they came up here. Nami paused before saying, I could kiss you, in fact. Nami pulled Izuku down by his collar and kissed him, causing him to yell. Thanks Izuku, you're the best, Nami said, batting her eyelashes at him while he was completely stunned. May approached Izuku with a sly smile. Look at you, Mr. Midoriya, the lady killer. Still short-circuiting his brain, Izuku could only mutter to himself. You realize she took your wallet, right? Izuku took his hand in his pocket. He had lost his wallet. That's fine. All my money's in my shoe anyway, he shrugged. Unspoken was the fact that years of Bakugo and his friends, borrowing, his allowance were the reason behind his habit. You know, declared May. When we get back, you could probably take Bakugo's lunch money. Izuku stared in awe. Are you crazy? Bakugo's quirk is really strong, and he's had 10 years to practice with it. Oh, inquired May, and do you think he could have beaten Doflamingo? It caused Izuku to pause. I mean, I only beat him by accident. Bakugo wouldn't last 5 seconds against you. Izuku chewed the closest roasted vegetable matter at hand, determined to ignore the statement because he had no idea how to respond to it. May brightened and proceeded to bargain for dials using her barrel of dirt, interpreting his silence as acceptance. After a farewell feast, the Straw Hats departed into the cloud sea with the Mary, newly loaded with dials and gold until her holds exploded at the seams. Izuku related how, with Sanji and Usopp's assistance, Nami tied Luffy to the mast with his own arms after he had consumed their ride down the previous time. May's eyes focused in and out as she looked down. I think there's something below us. We better drift forward a bit. The Mary floated forward with its sails unfurled until May deemed the area of ocean beneath them suitable for landing. They landed without incident in a patch of ocean shrouded in mist, although Izuku stayed tense the entire descent, half expecting something to go wrong. Sweet ground, how I missed you, Usopp exclaimed as he kissed the deck. We're still on the boat, Zoro stated sardonically. It's the principle of the thing. People weren't meant to go that high. The Skypians didn't have a problem. They had wings. Of course they didn't have a problem. Vice Admiral Jonathan was at the G8 Marine Base, looking out into the fog while scraping his vegetables into the trash can. Do you get the feeling that we just narrowly avoided a massive headache? Sir, said the Marine at attention beside him. Ah, never mind. I must be imagining things. Vice Admiral Jonathan also made the decision to keep it to himself if he saw a ship's shadow floating out of the sky. Izuku had been tense ever since they left Sky Island. Disaster was just around the corner, but the harder Izuku searched for it, the more he felt like he was going to miss it. It was like Doflamingo's string around his neck. Luffy appeared to be just as cautious, even sticking his head beneath the waves to search for trouble below. When Usopp announced their arrival at the next island, Izuku felt relieved. As the island drew nearer, he joined May at the railing. The Mary was passed by a train. Before realizing they were still on the ocean, Izuku had only remarked on how outdated it looked, feeling puzzled that such a relic was still on the rails when Japan's magnet trains traveled across the nation 10 times faster. Floating tracks bobbing on the waves caught his attention as he looked over the railing. Fearing that the tracks would become tangled, Izuku ran back to the rudder as the Mary passed over them. However, the rails sank easily beneath the ship and only came back to the surface when they were well past. May's gaze remained fixed on the train puffing past them. Did you see that? They found a way to make the rails support the train's weight, yet they sink when a ship passes over them. I wonder how they did that. Izuku and May both turned in surprise and said, "You'd have to ask old Tom that." Behind them stood a woman in a conductor's uniform, broad-bellied and swigging from an alcoholic-smelling bottle. "Course, Tom's dead, and I haven't the teensiest bit luck getting that Ouija board working, nagagagaga." "Tom?" inquired May. "You mean that guy that made Roger's ship?" The conductor calmed down instantly. "Why do you ask?" Izuku sensed that the world was losing focus. "Dead, Tom? Who was meant to build the truck so they could return home? May might be able to make one, but where would they find the necessary parts? How much time would it take? Roger sent a blueprint to him, something we needed made. Do you know about it?" Izuku wished May hadn't been so forthright about that, and he bit his tongue. Her eyes widened as the conductor looked into both of their faces. "You're Hatsume May, aren't you?" Before Izuku could stop her, May exclaimed, "That's me, future owner of Hatsume Enterprises." The conductor exclaimed, "Nagagagaga," with a loud laugh. "Tom used to rant about your designs, called them equal parts genius and insane. Spark plugs, combustion cylinders, a device to move forward by blowing itself up thousands of times. He used some of it to improve his own steam engine." She looked them in the eyes and said, "The name's Kokura. I'm sorry to say Tom never got a chance to work on your request, but he did pass it on to his 2 apprentices. So long as you kids are careful, I can introduce you to them. Don't want the Marines catching wind of anything from Gold Roger still afloat round these parts, understand?" "Hey!" exclaimed Zoro. "Who took my booze this time?" Kokura replied, "Well, I'd better return to my post. See ya." Izuku didn't notice 2 things until she dove into the water. To begin with, the bottle she was holding bore a striking resemblance to the one Zoro kept his liquor in. Secondly, her legs were a fish's tail. Huh, was she half fish man? I didn't know that could happen. As he passed, Sanji's head turned abruptly. "Wait, you saw a mermaid?" "I mean, that's what she looked like. Sweet beautiful mermaids, I'm coming," yelled Sanji as he dove in, still holding a lit cigarette in his mouth. Luffy's arm lifted him out of the sea after he made about 2 strokes. Luffy laughed and remarked, "Silly Sanji. Izuku's the one that always jumps out of boats, not you," as Sanji kicked at his wrist. A tremor shook the vessel. From beneath them came the groan and crack of splintering wood. The heart leapt up Izuku's throat. Along with the other straw hats, he charged down to the hold. Water bubbled up from the splintering keel, and a long crack ran the length of the ship. All around them, the timbers heaved like an animal's last gasps and bent inward. Usopp yelled, "The wheat's too much for the Mary," while gesturing to the abundance of gold on board. "We need to dump it, now." Nami gestured to the shore, saying, "Are you crazy? The biggest shipyard on the Grand Line is right there. If we dump the gold, how can we afford to fix the Mary? She won't make it if we don't." Luffy crossed his arms and hummed. "So, we need the gold to fix the Mary, but the Mary can't carry the gold. Why not have someone else carry it?" Both Nami and Usopp stared at him in wonder. "Gold's heavy, you moron. You can't swim with it." "Then let's throw it." Izuku saw the logic in Luffy's actions, while everyone else believed he was crazy. Izuku could hop along with it and ensure that it made it to the shore, even though it was literally a long shot. Izuku said, "Do you have any better ideas?" Both Nami and Usopp raised a finger and opened their mouths, but said nothing. "Great. Luffy, make a slingshot between the figurehead and the mast. Zoro, Sanji, Robin, and May can all help pull him back. I'll go on ahead and make sure no one takes our gold." May got into her mech and squeezed the mechanized hands in an experiment. With the starboard facing the shore, Nami turned the Mary around. In order to allow the others to pull Luffy back, Robin created a platform of hands off the port side. Everyone gritted their teeth as the timbers gave way and the ship leaned dangerously as their weight and the golds left the deck. As his legs formed the slingshot, Luffy grunted and hefted tons of gold bars between his arms. Izuku waited on the top mast while Usopp called for adjustments after spotting the slingshot. "Fire!" yelled Usopp. Luffy flew, encircling the gold as it blasted from the ship's side. Izuku trailed behind it, bouncing through the air while observing its arc across the sea. On the sandy shore, Usopp lined the shot flawlessly, landing Luffy in the gold. A massive sand plume erupted into the sky. After extracting himself from the crater, Luffy spat a mouthful of sand. Plague. Stupid sand, only meat's supposed to go in there. Izuku turned to face the Mary. The ship was shattered by the shot. Timbers slipped through Robin's enormous hands as they cupped Mary's hull. While Zoro and Sanji loaded their food, cooking supplies, and other necessities onto a raft, Nami quickly loaded her maps onto her waver. Usopp frantically hammered the Mary back together as he ran around with a hammer, but 3 more pieces of timber fell out for every one he replaced. The ship broke in two as Izuku dashed for the Mary. The port side of the sail tipped into the water as it toppled over. Still strapped inside her mech, May went down with that hull. Panic-stricken, Izuku rushed after her. Izuku felt his muscles relax as the water engulfed him. Bubbles of air slipped out of his open mouth, and he sank helplessly as all the strength left his body. Izuku's chest cried out for air, and his dimming sight was dotted with flashes of color. A huge hand clamped around his chest as he felt himself slipping away, and he leapt for the surface. Izuku looked up at his savior while hacking up seawater. Rows of dials strapped to the back of May's mech were all blasting air. It allowed the mech to skim the waves like a clumsy, ungainly jet ski, but it didn't quite keep it out of the water. May exclaimed, "Phew!" above the dial's thunderous roar. "I hadn't quite got them set in place when I fell in. You okay, Izuku?" Izuku gave her a tentative thumbs up and relaxed in her hold. After throwing him onto the sand, she proceeded to fuss over her dials crates. After shaking himself dry, Izuku looked over the rest of the shore. Chopper, his fur drenched, gasped for air with him. Zoro swigged from a bottle, then spat out the seawater in disgust. Sanji quickly oiled all of his metal cookware while muttering about rust, while Robin's face contorted at the sight of wet books washing up on the shore. Watching the starboard half slip under the waves, Usopp went to his knees at the shore. "She's gone," he exclaimed, panting. "Why did she break like that? Was it the gold?" "With all the gold we have, we can buy a new ship," Nami stated bluntly. Usopp gave her a frown. "How dare you? She was as much a member of the crew as anyone else, and you just want to replace her?" "Of course not. But we can hardly sail anywhere without a ship. What, do you think we can pull the Mary off the seafloor and put her back together again?" "Why not? This island has the best shipwrights in the world, doesn't it?" Luffy placed a hand on each shoulder from behind them. "We'll talk with the ship guys, all right?" When they saw Luffy's grim, serious face, their tempers immediately subsided. "Yeah," concurs Usopp. "We'll see what they can do." "We need to get the gold exchanged first," Nami stated. "We can't get any repairs done if we don't have liquid cash available," she continued, glaring at Usopp. After Usopp was placated by Nami's concession, the crew departed for Water 7. While everyone else escorted the massive pile of gold on top of Luffy's back, Robin and Sanji set out to explore the markets. Their journey to the bank was followed by hungry eyes, but everyone gave the pirates a wide berth after Izuku's arms erupted in sparks. They left the bank with 12 briefcases after Nami cracked the bank manager like a walnut. Watching the bank workers cram wads of cash into the cases was like being in a movie. Strolling around the city with enough cash to retire in style, Izuku felt like a gangster. Galila was a hive of carpenters and shipwrights. Men were climbing across the hulls of galleys and frigates that hung in the dry docks, setting planks and hammering nails like ants. Ropes stretched like a fishing net across the skyline, and masts rose high in the sky. The air was heavy with the smells of sawdust and pitch. There were many noises in the shipyard, including hammering, shouting, and the thud of timbers falling into place, but no one could be heard more loudly than a man with a square nose who called out instructions while a group of men moved a keel into position. Kaku jumped forward, flipped in midair, and landed nimbly in front of the crew when he saw the Straw Hats. "Welcome, Straw Hats, to Galila. You're right on time for your appointment." "We have an appointment. You were expected the moment you arrived in the city. You have my condolences about your vessel." Then Usopp shoved forward. "There's gotta be a way you can fix her up, right? I saw her go down myself. If it was just the siding that fell out, we could dredge her up and fix her good as new, but the keel split down the middle." Kaku nodded. "The keel's the heart of the ship. There's no replacing that." "There are heart transplants," May said. "Anything is impossible until someone makes it happen." Kaku spoke of heart transplants before responding, "Were it that simple?" Every keel is unique, and the whole ship is built around it. No matter how close you get to the original, the tiniest imperfections will tear the whole ship apart. That's not even getting into the fact that she's a blue vessel. She was designed for calmer seas. I could tell as much by the hulling. You're lucky you even made it this far. If you tried sailing any further along the Grand Linea. Kaku nodded. You're best leaving her where she lay. She did her job magnificently in the end, and she could only fail you if you tried sailing with her again. Usopp's eyes were watering with rage. Luffy put a firm hand around his wrist as he strode towards Kaku, his fists clenched. In an attempt to find someone who shared his views, Usopp looked at each of them, but all he saw in their quiet stares was acceptance and resignation. Usopp yelled, "Fine, if none of you are willing to try, I'll do it myself. Then I'll be the captain and go sailing on my own." As Nami crossed her arms, she said, "Don't be stupid. How are you even going to get the Mary to shore?" "I'll find a way. You'll see." As Usopp fled, Nami started to follow him, but Luffy blocked her path. "Let him go." "But Luffy, you heard him say." "I know, but he made up his mind." Zoro gave a nod. He turned his back on the crew. If he wants to come back, he needs to prove he isn't going to bolt on us again. Despite his mixed feelings about allowing Usopp to flee, Izuku turned away and followed the Straw Hats to Iceberg's office since no one else was pursuing him. After glancing at the group, Iceberg said to his secretary, "Leave us, please, and cancel my appointments for the rest of the day." Khalifa's lips were pursed. "But sir, you have a meeting with the mayor and—" "He will understand. You have the rest of the day off. Heaven knows you need it." "Is it really safe for you to be alone with these people?" the secretary asked, a frown briefly appearing on her face. "No, and that is precisely why you need to leave." Khalifa appeared as if she would still protest, but she bowed and walked out of the room, shutting the door behind her. As Nami began to inquire about ship prices, Iceberg gestured with his finger. Before he sat back at his desk, he carefully swept his office, looking inside plant pots and behind curtains for any snails that might be hiding there. "I hope you understand that I can't be seen cooperating with pirates of your notoriety," Iceberg said, pulling an envelope from his desk drawer and passing it to Izuku. "I heard about what happened to your caravel, and I have prepared a catalog of ships that might suit your needs and budget." Zoro questioned, "Won't you get in trouble for selling to us?" Nami frowned in his direction, obviously concerned that Iceberg would take advantage of it to raise prices. Iceberg nodded his head and replied, "I can say that I was forced into it or complied to keep you from laying waste to the shipyard. After all, Galila is the Marine's largest supplier of ships in the Grand Line." The envelope was opened by Izuku. When he realized the letter he was holding contained no reference to ships at all, he realized that one paper seemed rather small for a ship catalog. It said, "Kokura sent me a message. Tom gave us his blueprints, but he passed away before he could fulfill his promise to Roger. My fellow apprentice, who is thought to be dead, has completed it, but I'm being watched too closely. Locate Frankie and inform him that the last piece of his biggest puzzle was brought in by the puffing Tom." "Who's Frankie?" Iceberg gave him a serious look and replied, "A ruffian, running a gang in town that specializes in hunting pirate bounties and strapping their ships for parts. You'd best stay far away from them during your stay here." Izuku flinched. His words were, "Thanks for warning us. I heard from someone that he'd help fix up the Mary for us. I'm guessing it was a scam." He tucked the letter into his pocket. "Undoubtedly." Iceberg put his hands together and replied, "I'll give you time to review your options. Return once you have picked a ship with the appropriate funds, and I'll see to it you're back on the open sea within a few hours." Nami pulled at Izuku's shirt after they had left the shipyard. "Come on, show me that catalog. I need to know what we're working with if we're going to haggle." "When we're somewhere private." Nami nodded, glanced at the envelope speculatively, and retreated as she caught the edge in Izuku's voice. Izuku pondered absently as they strolled how he would come up with a reason to visit this Frankie. A loud explosion erupted all around them as they turned a corner. A thick cloud of smoke surrounded them, and Izuku coughed and blinked spots out of his eyes. Izuku caught them when he sensed a presence dart among them. After the smoke cleared, Izuku was gripping the neck of a heavy-set, brawny thug. They clawed at Izuku's fleeting Logia body, choking as he relaxed his hold. Izuku questioned, "Why did you attack us?" "The money," wheezed the thug. "Not dumb enough to try to cash your bounties, but I'm sure you wouldn't miss a case or two disappearing." Izuku would have thought Nami had his devil fruit based on the way sparks danced across her eyes and the way her hackles rose. He quickly raised his arms and yelled, "Whoa, slow down there. You wouldn't want anything to happen to that long-nosed friend of yours, do you?" as she took a menacing step in the direction of the thug. Luffy's gaze snapped on the thug, and Izuku felt a familiar pressure in the air, like Shanks or Roger. He gasped for breath and the thug's eyes rolled back, but he remained conscious. Panicked, the thug exclaimed, He's fine, and he will be if you bring just 2 of those cases. That's all we want." Izuku dropped him. When the thug got his bearings again, he coughed and rolled onto his hands and knees. "Unless, you really don't care about him," he said, shakily getting to his feet. "I'll take you straight to Frankie." With a knuckle crack, Luffy commanded, "Lead the way." Usopp plunged out into the sea. He swam toward Mary's figurehead after catching sight of it. He pushed off the ocean floor, bracing his back against the curved wood, but it would not move. Usopp heaved and pulled, his lungs burning, unwilling to come to the surface without this fragment of the Mary. 2 arms encircled him. The head of the figure exploded out. The figurehead was pulled behind Usopp by one hand while the other clamped around his back. Usopp fell onto the sand and coughed up seawater. "Thanks for that, but I could have handled it. I'm Captain Usopp, brave warrior of the seas, after all," he said, stumbling to his feet. Usopp's savior appeared to be extremely well built, with arms that oddly protruded around his shoulders and a face that appeared too smooth for a human skull. "I'm sure you could have. So, why are you fishing up boat parts? Hoping to sell them?" Usopp became furious. "Absolutely not. Mary is our ship, and I'm going to put her back together no matter what it takes." "Super!" exclaimed Frankie. "I like your fire, kid. Me and my boys, we specialize in fixer-uppers like yours." A suitcase was thrust at him by Usopp, who said, "Really? Then you could help me? It's all yours, just make her seaworthy again, okay?" "You bet. But first, we gotta get the rest of her up, right?" Usopp, "As much as we can," concurred. "I know we'll have to replace some of her, but it'll still be her, right? Even with a new keel?" "Of course. We'll make her right as rain." The rest of his family rushed over when Frankie waved. They pulled pieces of the Mary's hull out of the water by rowing boats equipped with cranes and diving equipment out to the location where the ship sank. "While we're working on her, why don't you and I head inside and grab some drinks?" replied Frankie. "I'm sure a brave warrior of the sea has all kinds of stories to tell. Boy, do you want to hear the time I tangoed with Bartholomew Kuma, the great warlord of the sea?" Frankie handed him a cola as Usopp regaled him with stories of his voyage, possibly leaving out 1 or 2 other characters and inflating some figures, and Usopp felt his eyelids droop after taking a swig. Frankie opened the suitcase and counted out the money as his own body shut down around him. "Wha Wadea doin'?" Usopp questioned in a slurred voice. "Your ship is finished, to start. Devastated. Completed. After everything you put her through, are you attempting to get her to sail once more? That's just cruel," said Frankie, shaking his head. "You ought to have given her time to rest." Usopp's anger was so intense that it pushed him to his feet, and he stumbled and punched Frankie in the face, not even realizing the pain until he noticed one of his fingers bent sideways. Secondly, it is not advisable to entrust briefcases containing cash to strangers. I'm much more interested in those other briefcases your friends have, but 40 million is nothing to sneeze at, Frankie said, holding up a new bounty poster. Especially strangers who hunt pirates for a living. "They don't want anything to do with me anymore," Usopp said with a flash of guilt. "I went out, yelled at them and walked away. They will stop giving you money. It's okay. If you got caught up with a warlord and managed to escape to tell the story, I'm sure I could negotiate a better price for you at that time." With his hands bound and his eyes drooping, Usopp wriggled like a worm toward the Going Mary's cracked, melancholy figurehead, feeling his nose hit the wood before he blacked out. Lousy butcher, gouging on cheap cuts, Zeph would have let him have it. Sanji's face brightened as he came out of the butcher's shop, muttering to himself and carrying a bag of cuts. "Oh, Robin Swan. I got the best steaks for you. How do you want them completed? Rare, charred, roasted with rosemary and garlic?" Sanji glanced around and blinked. "Robin Swan. You went where?" "I guess she became impatient," he said, shrugging. "I should kick the ass of that butcher." Robin pressed herself against the brick wall in an alleyway just around the corner, as though, knowing the devil fruits CP9 had at their disposal, it might actually swallow her up. "Are you certain you have no knowledge of Pluton?" Through his bare mask, Bluno posed the question. Crocodile believed there were details in the Alabasta poneglyph. "I didn't see it." "Oh Robin, we're not interested in that," said Bluno, shaking his head. "Not when we are aware that the blueprints are in this city somewhere." Robin swallowed nervously. Bad enough if Crocodile get his hands on it, but the world government? when they were so willing to use Buster Calls to maintain order? I don't know anything about it. Maybe, but we are aware that Roger forwarded the blueprints to Tom. He asked Tom to make it, as we know. In order to continue his work, he had 2 apprentices, as we know. We cannot give Straw Hat the weapon if he is here for it. Robin shuddered as the man towered over him and Blueno leaned in close. She could kill him by twisting his neck, but she would never get out of CP9, not when they controlled the city. You will discover where they are concealing it and guide us directly to it. You are aware of what happens to countries that threaten international peace, aren't you? Refusing to cry, Robin swallowed and said, I'll do it. The Frankie family's home is a gaudy patchwork of oddly shaped boards, metal plates, and chipped roof tiles that have been sloppily painted blue. Izuku is clueless about what to make of it, let alone the enormous mechanical arms that protrude from its sides like a mad spider. Is this the location? Luffy inquired. Izuku wasn't entirely sure the question was necessary. The place had Frankie family written in giant, sloppy letters over the door. The thug hastily nodded, and Luffy strode right up to the door. Izuku had been practicing control, and now he would have to put himself to the test in a real fight. He had the cuffs in his pocket, just in case, but he was afraid that if he went too far, he wouldn't even consider using them, and the building in front of him appeared far more fragile than the ones he had blasted apart at Whiskey Peaks. Izuku felt lightning dance along his arms as he prepared for the battle. When no one answered the door, Luffy scowled and blew into his arm, making it giant-sized, before his fist smashed through the front wall, leaving a jagged, gaping hole. They are met by a wall of spiked metal and cannons. Thugs crouched behind the barricade, pointing mismatched guns at them. Frankie standing with his arms crossed at the very front of their fortifications. 2 women with geometric hairstyles brandishing pistols at a groggy, lucid Usopp. Is tearing down the front wall the big idea? Frankie shouted. The door was open. Luffy glanced back at the hole and said, oops. A dangling piece of timber fell and thumped softly against the sand. Well, whatever. That simply means that getting your friend back will cost you another one of those suitcases. You can retrieve your friend if the girls bring them over slowly and place them directly in front of us. All right? After examining them, he said, we blow his brains out before anyone else makes a move, so don't get any funny ideas. Bounty's dead or alive anyways. Izuku dropped his suitcase, and Nami gave him a worried look, but Luffy told her to pick it up. With a look as booming as a storm approaching, Nami picked up the case, and Mei brought over both hers and Izuku's. Luffy nodded to Izuku when they reached the halfway point, and Izuku swallowed, knowing that even Luffy couldn't make it across the wide open room quickly enough to save Usopp, but that Izuku could move as fast as lightning. But would he be quick enough? What if he didn't, and they fired a shot before he could react? Izuku pushed his doubts aside and stepped forward, wrenching their guns up and sending a taser's worth of voltage through each woman's arm, both shots exploding and blowing 2 tiny holes in the roof. Izuku turned to the firmly established thugs, all of whom had their guns trained on Usopp, and positioned himself in front of Usopp, preparing to tank the shots, but Luffy beat him to the punch, his arms still oversized, stretching around them both, the bullets and cannonballs sinking into his skin before shooting back with devastating force. The thugs ducking behind the barricade to avoid the projectiles, but the barricade itself flew apart as cannonballs tore through it. Bullets flew in all directions, but Izuku's electric body parted easily around them, and their makeshift clubs and axes cleaved through his afterimages as he plunged into the confused thugs as Luffy yanked Usopp back towards safety. Half of them were knocked out before they even considered a reaction. Izuku's lightning slid easily across Frankie's skin as he kicked a thug with a glass eye, and Frankie punched clean through his head, giving Izuku a strange tingle that wasn't just from having someone else's hand in his intangible brain matter. Frankie remarked, "Wow, you're freaky," adding, "That's just unfair." Frankie smiled at Izuku after he punched him in the jaw, saying, "Nice try, but I'm tough as a tank. I'm not going to be easily defeated by you." Frankie rubbed at the fist-shaped dent in his jaw and said, "All right, that's it," after Izuku delivered another punch that almost knocked him out. "You're falling." When Izuku realized that Frankie's entire body, or at least the outside of it, was made of metal, he threw lightning at him while his fingers were still tingling from his last punch. Frankie clenched his teeth and froze as the electricity shot through his body, and when the shock was over, he shook himself and remarked, "Oof, that tingled a bit. I take it that you are composed of electricity? Try this for size, please." Izuku flashed around with Soru, wound up a punch, and slammed it into Frankie's back, who howled and was driven into a crater in the stone floor. Frankie charged at him, splinters of wood in his fingers, and Izuku leaned around each strike, using Kami-E while he let his electricity wash over Frankie. His entire front, from his face to his toes, was solid steel, but his backside was exposed. Izuku gritted his teeth, wondering briefly if he had overdone it again, and as the dust settled, he swept his eyes over the Frankie family, the few thugs still alive having dropped their weapons and instead shaking their fallen members and looking for signs of life. Helicopter? With a hollow voice, Izuku questioned, or any of Tama did I? They'll be fine, Chopper said, some concussions and broken bones, but nothing serious. The thugs tensed as he ran toward them, but they didn't stop him from examining them after casting a suspicious glance at Izuku. Recalling the letter in his pocket, Izuku walked over to Frankie and pulled him out of the crater by his tattered shirt, and Frankie gave him a sullen look through his dented face and said, "This was all my idea." Izuku sighed with relief, as this was his first real fight since Doflamingo, and he had managed to keep himself under control. Don't involve the others in this. No, Frankie, he's not yours, the thugs yelled. Stop talking. I have to accept responsibility for this, Frankie yelled at them. He returned his focus to Izuku and said, "Go ahead, try your hardest. If I ran away again, I wouldn't be able to live with myself." Frankie stiffened, Izuku inhaled deeply, and his gang of thugs and hoodlums pleaded with him for forgiveness. The puffing Tom brought in the final piece of his greatest puzzle. Izuku wondered if he had said something incorrectly, but Frankie moaned and looked at him as if he had just grown a second head. Why didn't you say that earlier? Roger Pirates, are you? Izuku shrugged and said, sort of, and the whole Frankie family, who were still awake to hear Frankie's words, went as pale as a sheet. We spent some time sailing with them. It makes sense why you kicked our ass. Are you that guy from Hatsume? Because that blueprint was some crazy stuff, I have to admit. Do you have any idea how intricate the wiring was for all those tiny spark plugs that I had to custom make? I never bothered making one from scratch, May replied. Did you shave off enough wiring? After examining her, Frankie remarked, damn, thin enough to sew with. I didn't win that wager against Iceberg. Frankie dusted the gravel off his shirt after Izuku helped him up. I prepared it in the rear. Do you want to look? As Frankie led the Straw Hats to the back of their home, he pushed a couch aside and twisted a hatch open, giving Izuku the impression that he was back on the Cloud Island. Tom advised me to ensure that no one was aware that I was creating this. When word spread about the letter, the Marines threatened to destroy it if they discovered Roger had requested its creation. Izuku felt tears in his eyes as he looked up at the tarp-covered car, which was strangely reminiscent of the moment May unveiled the DeLorean a year and a different universe ago. This was it, he was finally returning home after months of training, sailing, and fighting for his life. Awesome. Pulling on the tarp, Frankie yelled, introducing the Super Frankie Truck-kun of universe hopping, the mail-order baby from Hatsume Industries. Izuku's hopes and dreams came crashing down as the tarp fell. In the flickering workshop lights, a monster truck with 4 wheels taller than Izuku and a step ladder bolted to the side to climb aboard was visible in all its glittering chrome glory, adorned with hot rod flames and a mohawk on the vehicle's roof. So, said Frankie, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Although I made some changes to the external design, the internal components are all constructed according to specifications. Nice. With sparkling eyes, May questioned, it's incredible. When I was younger, I always wanted to drive one of these. But May, it's the wrong kind of truck, Izuku said, staring at her. A truck is a truck. Everything is incorrect. With this, how are we going to return home? May glared at him while hugging a tire and said, stop it, you're hurting Truck-kun's feelings. May, Izuku said, pinching the bridge of his nose, indeed, it appears lovely, but we must return home. Oh, calm down. The transmission and engine are present. I can always redesign it if it doesn't work. Izuku's heart began to return to a normal level. All right. He turned back to Frankie and said, I'm really sorry about that, it's great, really, I just got worried for a second. Yeah, that'll work. Don't worry, young man. You have a lot on the line, don't you? There is no one in the world better than Vegapunk when it comes to creating machines. Izuku turned to face the other Straw Hats and nodded, saying, well, I guess this will be goodbye. What? Hold on. What do you mean that you're going to leave? Chopper asked. Did we forget to tell you that May and I are from another world? Izuku blinked. What? Izuku later gave a brief account of their trip, saying, sailing with you guys was a lot of fun. I have to go home, even though I don't want to. I'm going to be a hero and I have to make sure my mom is all right. With tears in his eyes, Chopper remarked, you're the only intelligent person on this ship, so don't leave. You can be a hero here. Hey, Nami yelled, don't put me in the same category as Luffy and Zoro. Izuku knelt down and hugged Chopper, saying, Robin is very intelligent. She reads a lot of books, at least. In any case, you're a better doctor than me. I'm barely able to keep these guys alive. Sniffling, Chopper said, I could still use some help. You'll be all right. I am aware of it. You still owe me for boarding that machine of yours in the hold, Nami said, crossing her arms. Are you aware of the amount of gold we lost as a result of that? Hey, you can fill the entire space. You even installed bars beneath the seats. It still occupied some room. You had better return and settle the interest at some point. With a smile, Izuku said, you bet. Zoro gave a nod. Don't settle for anything less than being the best in your world. A best in Japan was ambitious enough, but the world? Then he smiled and shot back, same to you. Izuku was momentarily intimidated by the idea. Izuku turned to Luffy after bidding the rest of the crew farewell. Izuku was at a loss for words as he reflected on their lengthy journey, which included their first ascent of Reverse Mountain, their training with Rayleigh, Jaya, and the Golden Lions, and their eventual encounter with the Whitebeards. Luffy said, you're leaving now. Yep. Luffy gave his head a scratch. How are you going to do that from all the way down here? Izuku briefly didn't know what he was talking about. He then took a look around. The solid stone walls surrounded Frankie's underground workshop. Izuku grimaced. That's just great. How are we supposed to get the truck outside? Everyone's eyes were on Frankie. Whoa, don't look at me, said Frankie, raising his arms, because I had to build it down here in case someone came snooping around. So what, are we supposed to take it all apart, bring it upstairs, and put it back together again? May looked speculatively at the monster truck. We could also add some more cylinders, bring it up to a V12. May no. May yes. Or, Frankie continued, we could bust a hole in the ceiling and not spend weeks on this. I'm good with that. Luffy's knuckles cracked. Everyone ducked for cover as the ceiling fell on them as he threw a punch up. Okay. Frankie screamed, coughing and shoving the dust aside, I didn't mean to do it right now. Geez, well, the carpet was getting smelly anyways. Gritting his teeth, Luffy put his arms around the chassis and lifted it to the upper floor. The Frankie family cautiously retreated from the area as the boards creaked menacingly. Frankie said, so, how does it work, exactly? I mean, yeah, I get how it moves, but nothing I saw in there makes me think it would send you to another dimension. We don't know, said May. It just does. That's the almighty truck-kun for you. Huh. Are you going to do it right now? Well, we need to replicate how we did it the first time. Izuku understood the issue right away. We just hit 88 miles an hour when we hit that truck. Right. We need to start time traveling the instant we collide with the truck. Can we even accelerate that fast? How much road would we need? 100 meters. Maybe less. Frankie hummed to himself introspectively. You just need to go really fast, right? We could use the water rails. May inquired, and that train we saw, that one wouldn't go fast enough. Frankie smiled. Then it's a good thing I have one that goes even faster. How fast? Too fast. It doesn't have brakes. With his hands, Izuku covered his face. We're really going to Back to the Future 3 this one, aren't we? May smiled proudly and exclaimed, Great Scott, while everyone else appeared perplexed. Well, if we got all that figured out, Frankie replied, we gotta talk payment. Nami placed her hands sharply on Luffy's shoulders and scowled. After everything you tried to pull, you still want our money? Whoa, hold on, just hear me out. My old master, Tom, built the only ship in the world to ever sail the entire Grand Line, the Oro Jackson. I want to follow in his footsteps. The only ship tough enough to make it all the way needs to be built with the greatest wood in the world, from the atom tree. Wood like that is extremely rare and almost never shows up, but enough of it to make a ship just dropped on the black market. And you need our money to buy it. Frankie pulled his pockets out. My boys and I aren't exactly great at saving up. But anyways, I want to build the ship, then find a crew crazy enough to make it all the way. Marines, pirates, whoever sails it doesn't matter. All that matters is they make the voyage with pride. Zoro went on to say, and you want us to sail it. Finger guns were aimed at him by Frankie. Exactamundo. You're in need of a new ship. Get me enough money to buy that atom wood, and I'll take care of the rest. And why would we do that when we can get a ship from Iceberg? Frankie shook his head and tsked. First off, little lady, Iceberg and I learned from the same guy. I'm every bit as good as he is. He has an entire team of professionals behind him. But he doesn't have the best wood in the world. Marines would be all over him like flies on a turd if he had so much as a scrap of that stuff in his shipyard. Usopp yelled, "Now hold on," and gestured to the Mary's head. "Are you all really considering getting a new ship? The Mary's right there. If this wood's so great, let's rebuild her with it." Frankie remarked, "I could rebuild her from scratch with new wood. But if I did that, would it still be her? Every single board, from her keel to her topmast, would have to be replaced. I'd even have to redo the figurehead. And don't say I can save it, at best I'd have to carve new wood to fit the parts cracked beyond repair, and every time you'd look at it, you'd remember what I did. Even if I remade her perfectly, down to every last plank, would it still be her?" Usopp gasped. "I'd offer to let you stay the night, but, Frankie said, pointing to the location after examining them. Members of the Frankie family were lying on their sofas, bruised and unconscious, and another plank had fallen from the hole in the floor. "That's fine," a grimacing Nami said. "I'm sure we can find somewhere not too expensive." After glancing at Izuku and Luffy's faces, inns and motels on one street after another hid behind the counter and kindly asked them to leave. Nami finally gave in and flashed a whole suitcase full of cash after being turned down a dozen times. Eventually, he ripped his eyes away and showed them the door, looking at the money with the same hunger. "This is ridiculous," exclaimed Nami. "What's next? Are we going to have to knock on people's houses and ask if we can crash with them?" Luffy gave a shrug. "We could just sleep in the street." Nami looked at him with astonishment, and Izuku shared her dismay. Robin spotted them and brought Sanji over before Luffy could show them how to find a cozy and warm spot to sleep in a tree. "Is something the matter?" Robin asked. "What did they say about the Mary?" Usopp's expression twisted. He said, "We need somewhere to sleep, but nobody's sharing their bed and the trees are too short around here. Well, I happen to know a friend. He runs a bar, and he's got spare rooms upstairs. I'm sure he'd let us use them if I asked." Robin took them to an unnamed bar that was owned by a friendly man with bull's horn hair. Blueno greeted Robin as if they were old friends, then ushered them to a table and gave them the house's first round. While the bartender was cleaning glasses, Nami looked at him suspiciously. Why would anyone give pirates free booze? "It's actually an old trick of Blueno's," Robin acknowledged. "He makes the first round free, then charges more each round. Pirates get too drunk to notice or start buying his expensive liquor." She laughed as she said, "Though, I think this time he's doing it to be nice." Nami explained to the group how much money they had made from Sky Island's gold and how they would divide it once they purchased the ship. Nami pointedly asked the cook how much it cost to feed them all, despite Zoro and Sanji's loud complaints that more than half would remain on board. Luffy told a very animated story about Izuku zapping around and punching them all, which made Izuku blush, after she had explained their ship options and Usopp had described how he was kidnapped by the Frankie family after valiantly fending off 100 of them. As he told Blueno about the truck and their upcoming return trip, Izuku spoke quietly and looked at him to make sure he wasn't listening. While Robin continued to question the machine and its blueprints with an increasingly worried expression on her face, Sanji wept over Mei's impending departure. Even though Izuku insisted that they shared to save space, Blueno gave them each a room once the sun set and their mugs were empty. The rooms were spartan and cramped, barely big enough to accommodate a single bed, and Blueno explained he kept them for anyone who passed out in the bar. Luffy had trouble falling asleep. Even by ship standards, the room was oppressively cramped and felt deathly quiet after months on pirate ships. Then flashbacks to his childhood home filled his mind, along with the giddy anticipation that accompanied the realization that he would return home tomorrow. By the time he felt the bed swing out from under him, he had finally fallen asleep. Before Izuku could reach the door, it swung shut. He reached up, trying to catch himself on the edge of the abyss that swallowed him up. He landed on a solid steel surface after a brief descent. Izuku glanced around, but it was completely dark in the room where he landed. The green flashes of light bounced off the claustrophobic metal walls surrounding him as he ignited his arms with sparks. When he knocked on one, a ponderous, dull ring sounded. The metal felt at least an inch thick all the way around and didn't even have an air vent. "Hello," said Izuku. "What do you want with me?" Nobody responded. Izuku's breathing accelerated. He told himself that he would only deplete the oxygen more quickly, but naturally, that didn't stop his panic from getting worse. He pounded harder at the wall until the small room sounded like a church bell. "You bastards!" yelled Izuku. "Let me out!" The metal phased into his hand. Izuku jumped away with a yelp. He glanced at the wall, then at his hand. Electricity was conducted by metal. He was composed of electricity. Surely he could get through the wall. What if he became stuck, though? Or overburdened and unable to gather himself? Izuku took another deep breath and became aware that his oxygen supply was running low. And what about the others if he was in here, gasping for air? How about Mei? Izuku scowled at the wall while cracking his knuckles. Using the last of his breath, he inhaled deeply and rushed ahead. Just before he struck the metal and felt himself slide inside, he closed his eyes. Like the water in a cube-shaped glass, his body felt fluid and could zip around however he pleased. He formed a hand, pushed against the air, and brushed against the cube's surface. Izuku pushed out an arm, then a shoulder, then his head, and he gasped for air, pushing against the surface. He surveyed the bedroom. He had left the suitcase containing the cash at the foot of the bed. Izuku took a few more deep breaths, then hauled the rest of himself out and stood up on shaky legs. Izuku rushed into Mei's room without even pausing to catch his breath. The sheets were rumpled, as if she had just gotten out of bed. A circular hole in the metal, welded open with one of Mei's flame dials, was visible to Izuku as he yanked up the mattress. Mei gave him a blink. "Oh hey, Izuku, did they get you too?" "Yep. Turns out I can move through metal." "Cool. Turns out these babies come pre-packed with their own oxygen and have an adjustable nozzle. Do you think anyone else made it out?" Down the hall there was a loud clang of metal, and then Luffy's roar of triumph. Taking Mei's dials, the three of them welded the others open. Sanji left large dents in his own box, and Zoro had already cut halfway through his box before his swords became stuck. After some mouth-to-mouth, Usopp, Nami and Chopper coughed themselves back to consciousness. While Nami counted the berry in the briefcases and held them close to her chest, thanking every god she could think of that they hadn't been stolen, Chopper fussed over them all, prescribing treatment even as his head whirled. There was no sign of Robin when they opened her box. Blueno's bar was locked up and deserted. The Straw Hat's table was still there, and there was a wet cloth and a partially cleaned glass on the bar. Izuku searched the shelves and cabinets for a hint as to why they were locked, but the bar was stocked with nothing out of the ordinary. There were no bounty posters hidden behind the bar, no remnants of covert letters buried in the fireplace's ashes, and no explanation for how or why they all awoke in metal boxes. Those boxes had to have been built into the place, Izuku thought, and there's no way to open them, inside or out. A key devil fruit must have done it. We know Robin's, so it had to be someone else's. Probably Blueno, since he owned the bar. Zoro took a swig of Blueno's liquor and grunted beside him. Robin lured us here, and Blueno trapped us in those boxes, but it doesn't explain why they left us there. Or why they left the money. Nami was surrounded by stacks of berry and all of her suitcases were open. If they were after our bounties, they would have taken the cash. That means they wanted us for some other reason. Izuku retorted, or it wasn't us they were after, but it's not like we have anything else since the Mary sank. Izuku remembered the DeLorean and the monster truck. Since they had hidden both cars with the Frankie family, nobody else would have been aware of them. But she brought them there already, so it wouldn't make sense that they were after the vehicles, he said to Robin. Izuku then recalled the note from Iceberg. The only people they had interacted with since arriving in Water 7 were Frankie and Iceberg, but the shipwright had not explained why he had people observing him or why he had concealed his relationship with Frankie. "We need to check on Iceberg and Frankie," Izuku stated. "I think they're involved in this somehow." Sanji's eyes narrowed. "You think they abducted our sweet Robin Swan?" Izuku inhaled deeply. Despite the evidence against him and his own admission that Robin had vanished while they were shopping, Sanji had not accepted the idea that Robin had betrayed him. Izuku wanted to believe that Robin was blackmailed, as Sanji had suggested, but he didn't know her well enough to put his blind faith in her. More likely, they were targeted. Izuku looked at Luffy, who had a puzzled frown on his face and was staring resolutely towards the door. "Mei and I should head to Frankie's and check on the machines. Nami, why don't you visit Iceberg and say you've decided what ship to get?" Nami gave a nod. "I'll take Sanji and Luffy." Izuku checked his pockets and said, "Take Chopper too, just in case." His old friends, Gauze and Stitches, were sufficient to keep someone stable until Chopper showed up. Izuku ended up being followed down to the beach by Usopp and Zoro. When they noticed the enormous hole blown through one of their walls, they accelerated. While bandaging his brother, one of the thugs became alert upon spotting their approach. Straw Hats, thank goodness, they took Big Bro. Izuku felt nauseous. And the truck? They took that too, busted a big hole over there and carried it out to the tracks. Something inside of Izuku howled with rage. His arms erupted in electricity, and Mei gave him a startled glance. "Who did this?" Izuku asked in a hollow voice as he clamped down on his devil fruit, trying to control his rage. Pointing to Usopp, he said, but square. That's the weird part. We have no idea, but one of the guys had a long nose, like his. Izuku recalled a Galila shipwright having a nose like that. One of the people watching Iceberg. How could they have known that they were following them to Frankie's house? They hadn't mentioned the truck on the way when they went there to save Usopp. May inquired. Any idea where they went? No clue. We all got knocked out. I only saw them dragging it aboard before they got me too. Nagagagaga. There was a remorseful ring to the laughter that came from the ocean. Might be too late already. Puffing Tom was headed to Eni's lobby, with all stops along the way cancelled. No ship could hope to match her speed, let alone catch up with her. As she landed, Kokora jumped out of the water and staggered. She hiccuped after taking a swig of alcohol. Worse yet, Iceberg got shot, and word is that you guys did it. Someone's spreading rumors that you lot were less than pleased with what he offered. The whole shipyard's up in arms after you, and a lot of townsfolk are getting in on it too. So, what, we give up? Angry Izuku said. They took our only way home. The Frankie family added, and Frankie. To this. We can't let them take our big bro. Kokora gave a shrug. She drank her bottle and threw it into the sea, saying, Don't look at me. I only came to give the bad news. Doing something about it is on you guys. The brother of Frankie stated, We were working on Rocketman, but those guys busted it all up trying to take Frankie. We don't know how to put it back together. May's knuckles cracked. Let me have a look. Luffy bounded across the beach with Nami, Chopper, and Sanji cradled in his arms while May fumbled inside the train's engine. The lettuce guy got shot, Luffy commented. Chopper held up a bloodstained bullet and yelled, and they didn't even take out the bullet. Those lazy idiots said it was too close to his heart, that one wrong move and they'd kill him. Dr. Kureha would have chucked them off a cliff. The Marines got Frankie in the truck, Izuku stated. If we don't get them back, May and I don't get to go home. Izuku slapped his hands together and smiled. So we go beat up some Marines? Sounds easy enough. Easy? Stifled Usopp. We're headed for Eni's lobby, nobody's ever attacked it before. Then they won't be expecting us, now would they? Sanji responded. An irate mob's distant muttering arose around the shore. Huh. Those guys must have gotten really angry about something. Did any of you steal their meat? Luffy said, tilting his head. They think we shot Iceberg, Izuku said in a serious tone. Luffy let out a retching sound. They're getting mad over lettuce. Salads aren't food. They're the stuff fancy places put in front of people so they know the meat's coming. When they saw the horde of pirates and thugs on the beach, the crowd abruptly stopped. A single man strode ahead. He held a cigar in his mouth with one hand while swinging a rope with the other. All right, you bastards. Iceberg offered you a ship fair and square, and you shot him in the back. Actually, Chopper replied, the entry point for the bullet was on the front of his chest, so he was shot. Like a whip, the rope darted. The rope cracked beneath Chopper's feet, and he yelled and leapt up. Enough games. If you want off this island bad enough to shoot Iceberg for a ship, you're in luck. You get to leave right now. He laughed hysterically and continued, if you apologize and hand over some of that money, we'll even let you build a raft first. Behind him, the crowd positioned themselves, rolling pins in hand and pitchforks leveled. Zoro pulled out his swords and Luffy cracked his knuckles. Izuku rushed forward, looking between them and the terrified crowd. Wait. We're not the ones that shot him, there's no need for this. Don't lie. Khalifa saw her do it. She saw Nico, Robin and someone in a mask running away, and Robin held a smoking pistol. Where would we get a pistol? Without hesitation, Polly said, from your ship? Well, you obviously brought one with you. What kind of pirates don't use guns? Izuku revealed his empty belt by pulling back his shirt. Izuku leaned over to Sanji and said, You didn't buy any guns yesterday, did you? None of us do. And you can check in town and see if any of us bought guns. I didn't, and I'm sure Robin Swan wouldn't buy something so barbaric while she went off for some private shopping. Izuku resisted the impulse to slap his face as Polly exclaimed, There, obviously she bought a gun. Did you check with the shop owners? Polly gave him a rope crack. Quit wasting time, pirate scum. What does it matter where the gun came from? Maybe she bought it, or maybe she got it from the Frankie family. Khalifa saw her do it. We're not going to let you talk your way out of this one. As the straw hats prepared and the crowd drew closer, Izuku became alarmed. He frantically looked for anything that would establish his innocence. The boxes made of metal. How could he persuade them to travel there? And what would it demonstrate? No, he needed to have a sign that someone else was pursuing him on him. The idea hit him like a bolt of lightning. To his relief, he discovered Iceberg's letter on him when he reached into his shirt. Someone else was after Iceberg. I don't know who, but he gave us this message when we met with him. Izuku waited. Izuku flinched, fearing a fight, as Polly's rope snagged around his wrist. The letter was pulled away by the rope as it slid to his fingers. Polly smoothed out the crinkled paper and held it up to the sunlight. Everyone in the town leaned in to look at him. Well? Inquired Izuku. Polly tore it to pieces and threw it in the wind, saying, it looks like his handwriting. But even if he did write it, it doesn't prove anything. Izuku drew a long breath. Fine, you want us gone? We were leaving anyways. We just need to fix up the train first, then. He turned back to the villagers and yelled, get that train. Don't let them escape. Oh no, you're not getting away that easy. You need to pay for what you did to Iceberg. The townsfolk didn't do anything wrong. They were attempting to defend their house and ward off those they believed to be evildoers. However, Izuku had to get home and needed that truck. He might never see his mother again if they wrecked the train. Izuku was about to make a decision when a rubber fist sped by. The fist struck Polly's face, shattering his goggles. With their weapons hanging in loose hands, the villagers froze. Luffy came up and said, I don't care about Salad Guy. Somebody took my friends and took my friends' stuff. We're going to beat them up and get them back. And if we find the people that shot Lettuce Guy, we'll beat them up too. The crowd waited for someone to initiate contact, looking anxiously at one another. Polly heaved himself back onto his feet and groaned. He threw more rope at Luffy and spat a glob of blood onto the sand. Rope fragments fell across the sand as Zoro swung his blades. Damn pirates, complained Polly. Scum like you aren't welcome here. As the crowd rallied around Polly's rage, Izuku grimaced. With reluctance, Izuku threw a bolt at Polly while forming lightning in his hand. Electricity danced across his skin as he jerked, lighting up, and then he fell to his knees. His charred hair emitted smoke. Someone fled after dropping their pitchfork. Townspeople fled for cover, many of them leaving their weapons behind, and they caused a stampede. Polly was the only one left, clambering out of the sand with trembling arms. Chopper rushed toward him. Chopper just bandaged the hand after Polly attempted to bat him away. Izuku checked on Mei while Chopper attended to Polly's burns and the other Straw Hats looked for any lingering attackers. How long will it take? Oh, I'll have the flamethrower done in a few hours. Do you think it should go up front, or on the sides? Mei gave an eye roll. It was just a joke. I know you too well to believe that. Relax, I already got the flamethrower done. Just let me patch the holes in the boiler and we'll be good to go. Izuku looked, and sure enough, there was a long nozzled flame dial sitting on top of the engine. Taking a deep breath, Izuku remarked, as long as we get to leave on time. Oh, so does that mean I get to add a cannon too? All aboard, exclaimed Izuku, we're ready to go. Mei muttered a complaint and continued to patch. All right Mei, start her up, Izuku said after the Straw Hats and Frankie family had crammed themselves into the one compartment. Can't? What? Didn't you just fix it? Yeah, but I have no idea how any of this stuff works. The boiler could explode if I tried. Do you want me to blow up the train, Izuku? Izuku let out a groan. Oh, that's just great. Where the heck are we supposed to get a train conductor? Right over here. Kokora leapt out of the ocean and wrung out her conductor's uniform. She turned on the engine and fed coal into the boiler. You better be paying me overtime for this, brats. Next stop, Eni's lobby. Rocketman lurched forward. Izuku nearly fell out of the train, holding onto a grip with one hand. What's the plan for when we crash? Kokora asked as he dragged himself back inside. What? Exclaimed Izuku. Didn't Frankie tell you? Rocketman here's a prototype. Tom never put any brakes on him. Wait, so that wasn't a thing that got broken off? Mei inquired. Guess that's why I had to cut a hole for the lever. A little girl poked her head into the window. We're going to crash? With a yelp, Izuku dragged her inside. Kokora frowned down at her and sternly said, Chimney, I told you to wait at home. Got bored, Chimney uttered. So Gonbi and I went to find you. With a twitch of its nose, the rabbit in her arms let out a meow. Izuku squeezed his nose and pondered whether the excruciating pain building inside his head was a migraine. Do you want me to bring her back? I think I could make it. The train roared ahead as Kokora blew the whistle, asking, Bah, you think this is all Rocketman's got? Beneath them, the tracks trembled, clacking rickettyly, making Izuku's teeth tense. Chimney'll be fine. She's smart enough to keep herself out of trouble. Izuku chose not to express his skepticism as he gazed down at the smiling girl who had strayed onto a pirate-infested runaway train. The train chugged along as the weather soured. Kokoro remarked, "Good thing we left when we did. Looks like we just missed Aqua Laguna," as the first waves of a squall blew past them. From the car behind them, Izuku heard a crash and a yelp. Chopper and Polly were surrounded by straw hats and thugs when he leapt across the air and ducked through an open window. Polly was holding a length of charred rope with his back to a wall. "Just calm down." Chopper wrapped the arm in more bandages and ducked under a fist. "You'll tear your skin if you keep moving like that." Polly yelled, "Where are you bastards taking me?" From the window, Izuku replied, "We're heading to Eni's lobby." Polly swatted a rope at him and yelled. Izuku allowed it to move through him. "Sorry about this, didn't realize Chopper dragged you along." Chopper gave him a snarl. "I couldn't just leave him on the beach. Sand might have gotten in his bandages." "Wait. Eni's lobby? Why are you going there? Marines stole stuff from us, so we're getting it back. And we'd also like to know why Robin ran off on us. They're probably the ones that had Iceberg shot, by the way." Izuku leapt to the front and left Polly to absorb that bit of information. A small box bobbed along the waves on the horizon, steadily approaching. When Kokoro said, "Well, would you look at that, we'll catch them long before they make it." A Marine glanced out the rear door as they approached, narrowed his eyes at the train speeding in his direction, and hurried back inside. 3 Marines returned, one of them brandishing a huge sword that could be seen even from the distance between them. The Vice Admiral's sword darkened with a coat of haki as he raised it high. Izuku had a sudden, icy realization that he was going to cut the tracks. A javelin of lightning formed in his hands. He threw it, and the force of his shot split the waves of the ocean. Izuku knew it would miss and strike one of the Marines observing as it flew. The Vice Admiral swung his sword just before the first thunderbolt came, but he prepared another one in the hopes that he would have time for another throw. The lightning was split in 2 by his sword. One half shot into the air, the other half sputtered against the seawater. My second spear was thrown by Izuku. Izuku followed the lightning as it headed for the puffing Tom. The Vice Admiral's eyes widened as he saw Izuku behind the second bolt, which T-Bone's sword had cleaved. His other arm sent a taser through the third, and Izuku's punch caught him beneath the chin, embedding a Marine in the metal wall of the caboose. Izuku had to get off the train to avoid the enormous sword as T-Bone slashed at him. Taking advantage of the situation, the Vice Admiral dragged his 2 unconscious men back into the train and closed the door. Izuku gave the handle a try. There was a lock on the door. Recalling the metal box, he considered kicking it down, but instead swung sideways and phased through a wall. Marines in the caboose's firing line immediately trained their weapons on him, but Izuku outran them. Before T-Bone's hockey-coated sword forced him to back off, he sprang forward and dispatched 4 Marines. "Men," T-Bone said with tears running down his cheeks, "it touches my heart you are all willing to fight for justice, but this is an opponent you cannot defeat. Evacuate this carriage and leave me to fight this evildoer alone." Izuku released the Marines. T-Bone patiently waited with his sword loose while Izuku considered his options. He was tempted to speed ahead and bring the train to a halt, but he couldn't risk Rocketman being derailed in the interim by T-Bone. Something about T-Bone's chivalrous demeanor reminded him of Yoroimusha, but he would almost certainly have to fight. Izuku could ask as many questions as he wanted. What did they want with Frankie? Why did they take the truck? And how did Robin get involved in all of this? Izuku saw a single question that connected all the threads and sat at the center of the web. "Why did you guys shoot Iceberg?" The Vice Admiral's face flashed with shock. "You mean to say that wasn't your doing?" "We don't have guns." T-Bone considered what he had said. "None of the reports mention it, but that hardly matters. I can only assume you were trying to confuse me." "So the Marines have no reason to want Iceberg dead?" T-Bone hesitated. Then he gave himself a shake. "If it is so, then it is for the good of all. Quit stalling and prepare to face justice." Izuku jumped when he realized that talking would not help. The Vice Admiral would have to awkwardly raise his sword to block his aim, which was aimed at T-Bone's chest. T-Bone, instead, drew the edge up and leaned aside. Izuku leapt, spun around T-Bone's head, and kicked him in the back. The blade of T-Bone's sword cleaved cleanly through the roof as it flashed around. The train car lurched beneath Izuku as he landed. Slowly, the blurred background came back into focus as the harsh squeal of brakes screamed through the ripped hole in the train. T-Bone blocked Izuku's path as he attempted to run for the door. Rather, Izuku leapt to his feet, ran to the opposite end, and phased through the metal roof. His footsteps were pursued by T-Bone's sword as it cut through the roof. Izuku quickly jumped around to keep his feet from getting cut to ribbons. He arrived at the end in time to see the Rocketman smash into the unsecured carriage. The carriage was a lead weight slowing Rocketman down as the train chugged on, pushing it forward while the brakes remained engaged. Even worse, the engine and brakes clashed, causing the tracks to heave and buckle, potentially bucking Rocketman into the ocean. T-Bone cut a diagonal piece of roof as Izuku aimed at the brakes, intending to blast them off. Izuku barely managed to hold onto the shorn portion of the carriage after his shot missed the mark. Izuku could only duck and hope the others worked something out while T-Bone pursued him. As the flamethrower Mei had added roared to life, Zoro and Luffy combined 2 attacks while perched atop the train carriage, trying to figure something out. Izuku punched T-Bone into the sea and then leapt for cover as he gaped at the looming fire. The carriage burst into a flaming shower of ripped steel and wood. Their fight with the Rocketman had twisted the wheels into gnarled dolly-like shapes, and they popped into the air. Rocketman roared through the burning wreckage after the tracks were cleared. But at Eni's lobby the puffing Tom had pulled into the station. Between them, cannonballs rained down on the sea, and Marines crowded the train station. Izuku zapped cannonballs directed at the tracks, while Luffy swatted them out of the air. The Marines arranged a firing line as Rocketman got closer to the station. Mei's flamethrower swept across the docks, dispersing their ranks just before they fired, and Usopp's slingshot sprayed them with chili sauce, rotten eggs, and smoke bombs. The huge engine of the Rocketman rattled to a halt, and the brakes screeched like banshees. Izuku jumped off as they arrived at the charred, pocked station, glared up at the enormous gates, and declared, "Time to get our truck back." As he watched his loyal agents bring his latest acquisitions before him, Spandam rubbed his hands together with delight. The capture of Nico Robin would be a nice addition to his resume, and the renegade Cutty Flam was a delightful surprise, but most importantly, he had more than just the Pluton blueprints. No, he actually had Pluton. It's smaller than he anticipated and as gaudily decorated as anything else Cutty Flam had ever created, but after he saw the aged, wrinkled parchment and its mysterious, even extraterrestrial, designs, he realized that the machine in front of him couldn't be anything else. How could any design match the graceful, refined harmony of mechanical wonders written on that ragged, torn blueprint? Who but a long-gone civilization from a world before the lost century and all the atrocities committed against it would create a weapon specifically intended for use on land? Spandam dreamed of his rise to glory as he ran a reverent hand over Pluton's polished metal surface. Rob Lucci called out, "The Straw Hats are here," cutting short his moment of triumph. "Most of them won't be a problem, but Midoriya's devil fruit may prove a problematic. I advise we call in an admiral." Spandam frowned. The admirals would undoubtedly take Pluton away from him if they learned that he had it. No, it was not permitted. "Are you saying that you are no match for a few measly pirates from the East Blue? 2 of them sailed with Roger, and there are 8 of you." 7. Jabra clarified, snickering. Spandam dismissed it. "Besides," Nico Robin said, silently horrified, "if everything else fails, we can use a buster call to blast them to bits." Spandam was holding up a golden transponder snail. Some Marines pulled Cutty Flam and Nico Robin in the direction of the Gates of Justice while Spandam hummed to himself and leapt inside Pluton to examine its complex control system, which his sheer intelligence will undoubtedly master in no time. After nodding to his fellow CP9 members, Rob Lucci left to welcome the newest arrivals to Eni's lobby. Hundreds of Marines stormed out of the barracks and courthouse, screaming, brandishing swords, and firing pistols as they charged the gang of pirates and thugs on the docks. Across the walls, gunfire echoed like a never-ending supply of firecrackers, broken occasionally by the deep boom of a cannon. The island reverberated with thunderous cracks, blaring trumpets, and the screams of the injured as metal was ripped apart and stones shattered. Izuku's mind was quiet for the first time in his life. His thoughts vanished, leaving only the ground beneath his feet, his fists, and the closest Marine face, as the echoes of the battle around him rang hollowly. His fists erupted, causing equal parts shock and bruises. Each impact sent Marines flying, bowling over their fellows. The bullets and swords that did make it to him either caught a fellow Marine or went through without harm. He moved through the ranks like an electron moving between copper atoms, feeling like lightning in human form. The Marines in the front realized their mistake and attempted to flee, but they were pushed into the battle by the sheer volume of bodies behind them. Marines with pale faces and trembling bodies stabbed and screamed at him. As he crushed their rib cages and dispersed them like sparks, Izuku never even noticed their fear. Luffy assumed the role of their shield as they plowed through marine forces, with Izuku at the tip of their spear. Luffy absorbed the rain of bullets and dispersed them back among the marines, keeping himself and Geppo in the air. Gouged pieces of masonry were hurled back by cannonballs from the sterile marble front of the courthouse. Zoro and Sanji arrived behind Izuku, sweeping up the threats that had gotten away and looking for simpler targets. They were followed by Mei, Nami, and Usopp, who threw their own thunderbolts, fireballs, and toxic gas bombs into the battle. 10 more marines stumbled behind them for every one they killed. Eni's lobby became a bloodbath in a matter of minutes. The stone walkway was covered in blood. The boots behind the marines trampled them as they slipped and fell. Crawling away from the battle, clutching wounded arms, bleeding legs, and scorch marks on their chest, wounded men moaned in pain. Many others made no movement at all. As Chopper darted between them, he frantically applied salves to burns and bandaged wounds, sometimes punching out the lights of a marine who was still performing their duty before bandaging them. After gathering their weapons and upgrading their equipment, the Frankie family charged back into the battle. The two giants on either side of the gate were engaged in a lengthy discussion with Usopp when Izuku brushed past them. He kicked cleanly through the enormous wooden slab that blocked the path to the courthouse with a foot coated in hockey. With a war cry, Marine lieutenants and captains rushed at him in ranks brandishing sea prism, glass, and wooden weapons. His forearm was struck by a wooden bakken, and his ribs were cut by a glass knife. Izuku used lightning to respond to their wounds. Many Marines fell twitching and scorched, while a few used metal swords to ground the attack. The few who remained fell like the Eni's lobby walls after taking lightning-fast blows to the jaw. Izuku strode up to the doors of the courthouse and flung them open over the bodies of the fallen Marines. Baskerville's 3 heads glared down at Izuku from the enormous bench that overlooked the courtroom. "Intruder, you are just in time for your trial. You stand accused of piracy, theft, murder, and serving as an accomplice to Gold Roger." After shaking his head, Kerville remarked, "Look at him, he's just a kid. Let's acquit him." Ba yelled, "That kid took out all the captains, convict him." And questioned, "Why bother with either? Just kill him already." After giving him a slap, both heads turned to study him. "You know what? You're right. Jurors, your thoughts?" With their enormous maces and spiked armor, the jurors leapt out and yelled, "Guilty." There was a loud clash as their maces fell on Izuku. The broken floor was deserted when the dust settled. The jurors gave each other shoulder pats while grinning to themselves. Lightning swept through them in a single flash, bringing them down like trees. "The jurors!" exclaimed Baskerville. "You make a mockery of our great government's justice, face my wrath." 2 huge cutlasses were swung by the judge. Izuku bounded off the air toward the judge after jumping over the blades. Izuku headbutted the center after 2 fists grabbed the heads on either side. The cutlasses clattered to the ground as all 3 heads sagged forward, woozy and bloodied. Izuku took hold of the judge's coat. The judge's eyes widened with fear as his fists crackled with sparks. "Where are they? You won't get anything out of me." Izuku gave the offending head a shock, and looked between the 2 unconscious heads at his sides as Kerville's eyes rolled into his head. "Wait. If you're asking about Nico Robin and Cutty Flam, their trials were skipped, to my frustration. They've been sentenced to death, and as we speak, they're heading to the Bridge of Hesitation. Once they're across, even Gold Roger himself wouldn't be able to take them back." "And the truck?" queried Izuku. The wa?" Izuku heard a sudden warning of danger from observation hockey. He dropped Baskerville and flung himself to the side. Baskerville's coat exploded into a furry arm with glittering claws, impaling the area where Izuku had been standing. Jabra tossed the whimpering judge aside and wrenched his arm from Baskerville's back. Holding his claws up to the light, Jabra grinned and said, "You're faster than I thought you would be. Doesn't matter, though. You won't be moving much once I get these inside of you. Then I'll get to see what lightning tastes like." Izuku lunged forward and delivered a blow. With the help of Tekai, Jabra took the blow and swung his claws out. Long furrows were made across his chest by the glass points. "First blood goes to me," smiled Jabra. He then glanced at his arm. His fur was wet with blood where Izuku's punch had landed, and the skin had been torn away. Izuku remarked, "You're using Tekai while you move, how do you manage that?" "Like I'd tell a filthy pirate like you, now die." With a growl, Jabra and Soru charged forward. Izuku leaned back, then jumped back quickly as Jabra's other hand came up to him. Jabra kept slashing and Izuku kept jumping away in a panic as the chase went on. Jabra licked his ragged teeth and said, You can't keep this up forever. The moment I get you, you're finished. Izuku was backed into a corner by Jabra. Jabra swung both hands in a huge downward slash, grinning fiercely. Like Buggy, Izuku split his body around the blow, keeping the split an inch ahead of each claw and recombining himself with ease after they were passed. Jabra's claws hit the courtroom floor in a massive explosion of stone. Izuku's flickering form bounced gravel chunks off it. Izuku's leg shot up as Jabra leapt away. Jabra hissed as his teeth clashed with a splatter of blood. "You'll pay for that," he uttered, his voice distorted by his tongue bite. 10-finger pistol. Izuku flickered away as Jabra's fingertips carved through the stone wall. "That's Shigen and Tekai." "I haven't thought about using two powers at once," Izuku said, reappearing behind him. "Quit mocking me and fight," Jabra snapped. Izuku leaned back and used Tekai on a leg at the same time. Izuku attempted to sweep Jabra's legs with a low kick, but Jabra leapt into the air instead. "I got you now." Moonlight 10-finger pistol. Jabra bounced off the air and smashed like a missile towards Izuku, who was unsteady from the kick and Kami-e. The marble floor gave way. From the point of impact, stone rolled out like a wave, smashing the judges' stand and toppling benches. The walls crumpled inward and cracked, and dust hung menacingly from the stone roof. Jabra got up and looked around the room, huffing and spitting a glob of blood onto the broken floor. He held up a key that hung from a cord around his neck and said, "If you want your little Robin back, you'll need the key to her C-prism cuffs. That's even assuming you make it before Spandam hands her off at the gate of justice." "Faye, where did you go, you little rat? Running away?" he asked. Jabra gave his ears a flick. No static crackle or footstep revealed Izuku's location, but the odd pebble fell from the cracked ceiling. "Did you really leave?" He turned at a low moan. When he withdrew, his claws were halfway to his target. "Oh, it's you. Can you keep it down? I almost skewered you." Ba lifted his arm feebly. "Hisa, shut up. I don't have time to help weaklings like you. I won't let Midoriya leave this place alive." "He's in," I said. "Shut up, he's in my." Out of Baskerville's coat, Izuku exploded. Izuku slashed both of Jabra's hamstrings with Baskerville's own cutlass. With a yelp, the CP9 agent fell to the ground. In an attempt to stop the bleeding, he put his hands to the wounds. Hissing, "You should have killed me there," Jabra said. "Don't think you can underestimate me. I'll kill you for this." Izuku caught him by the chest hair. Jabra attempted to swipe at him, but his arm was frozen by a fast zap from Izuku's fingers. "The truck. Where is it?" "The what?" Izuku gave him another zap. "The device you took from Frankie's place. Where is it?" Izuku asked, inhaling deeply. Jabra's gaze expanded. Jabra laughed and said, "Pluton? So you were the ones making it? You're too late. Spandam's activating it as we speak. Once he figures out how to unleash its terrible power, he will crush you and your pathetic crew." "Where? Where?" Jabra let out a fit of laughter. "Are you seriously telling me you're going after it? Huh. If you want to die so badly, then go right ahead. He has it on the bridge with Robin. Assuming you brats even make it that far, Pluton itself will be our last line of defense. Even if you get the key, you'll never get her or Pluton back." Izuku delivered a blow. Jabra fell to the ground with his bleeding tongue lolling out and his eyes rolling back. Izuku quickly bandaged the cuts on his legs and tore off 2 pieces of his shirt. He got up to go, but he was distracted by the sparkle of the key around Jabra's neck. "Sorry about those, I don't have time to stitch them up." Izuku hesitated, then yanked it free and put it in his pocket. "Are you going to cause any problems?" he asked, turning to face the 3 judges. Ba shook his head quickly. "Good. I'm sorry about all this, but I just want to go home." Izuku leapt onto the roof, leaving the broken courtroom behind, and looked around Eni's lobby. In front of him loomed a huge tower. Inside, Izuku heard the rumblings of combat, and he saw a giraffe's neck slicing through one wall, leaving a neat cut in the masonry. From a window, giant pearlescent bubbles floated. Near the top, on a bare section of wall, a door opened, and Sanji pinwheeled his arms to prevent himself from falling off. I don't see a bridge," Izuku remarked to himself. "Might see it from up there." Izuku jumped up the side of the tower and sat on top of it after pausing to hurl a lightning bolt at Sanji's opponent. Usopp pointed his slingshot at him and yelled. Usopp yelled, "Hey, don't sneak up on me like that." His arms trembled and his skin was white as bone. "I was just lining up the perfect shot to take them all out at once." Usopp pointed, and Izuku looked. A bridge extended to a stone gate at the sea's edge, across a huge chasm in the island and under the shadow of the enormous tower. In the distance, the monster truck's bright red hood glowed like a dim star. Izuku leapt. With a few kicks, he crossed to the bridge despite the endless black chasm in front of him. The guards who were accompanying Robin and Frankie drew their swords and took their places. Spandam moaned in the back while he tinkered with the controls of the monster truck. Flicking a switch, he said, "One of these stupid buttons must turn this thing on," and the headlights came on. "Is it on? I think it's on. Behold, Midoriya, the Viridian Flash, Scourge of the East Blue and known accomplice of Gold Roger. Here stands Pluton, one of the 3 ancient weapons, said to have the power to destroy entire islands. And now it is mine. Behold and tremble, as I wipe you and your crew off the face of this planet." A button was pressed by Spandam. Twice the monster truck beeped. Nothing happened except for Spandam pressing more buttons, which caused the window wipers to move and roll down the windows. Spandam slammed both hands onto the steering wheel and exclaimed, "Why won't you do something?" The foghorn on the monster truck was loud and ear-splitting. All of the Marines let their weapons fall and scratched at their ears. "Did I get it right?" yelled Frankie. "The schematic didn't specify what sound it should make, so I used what we typically make for boats." "It's usually higher pitched," Izuku explained, "but that part doesn't really matter." "Hey!" exclaimed Spandam. "Quit ignoring me or I will blast you all again." "Please don't, sir," exclaimed a Marine. "My ears are bleeding." "Shut up. You should be glad to give your lives to erase the last of Roger's vile legacy. Now face the wrath of Pluton." Spandam gave the horn his full weight. The force of it caused the truck's hood to rattle. They threw themselves into the sea, Marines. Before Spandam could blink, Izuku sprang forward, grabbed him by the shirt, and physically dragged him out of the car. He pulled out his sword and yelled, "Funkfried, deal with him. Wahoo! How dare you? Pluton is mine, and I won't let you take it." The elephant transformed from the tusked sword. The few Marines remaining on the bridge were bowled out of its path as it trumpeted and charged in his direction. Izuku jumped up and punched down just before it trampled him. Funkfried stumbled to its feet, blew a final trumpet roar, and landed sideways. Spandam stared around, gaping. Funkfried lay unconscious. Izuku stood between him and the truck, and all his Marines had fallen. "Don't come a step closer, or I'll press it," he said, pulling out a golden transponder snail. "No," yelled Robin. "Are you trying to kill us all?" "That's the idea," exclaimed Spandam. "I should have used this from the start. Once I got Pluton, I should have wiped that miserable island off the face of the map, and you with it, but no matter. I can always come back and do it myself with Pluton. In the meantime, I'll simply use this buster call to clean up this mess. So long, Straw Hats." Spandam slammed his hand down on the snail's button. Izuku sped ahead, grabbed the snail, and smashed the mechanical components to pieces as time slowed to a crawl. As quickly as its shell permitted, the snail blanched and slithered off. He stared at his hands in disbelief as Spandam's hand slapped onto his empty palm. "But my buster call, you destroyed it." Robin fell to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Lucci, get over here, I need you right now," Spandam yelled loudly as he retreated until his back struck the gates of justice. Izuku stood there for a moment, waiting for something to happen. As the moment grew uncomfortably long, Spandam felt sweat trickle down his face. Izuku started to move, but a whistling sound from above interrupted him. Rob Lucci landed on the bridge in front of Spandam after he flew out of the sky. Spandam's face became joyful. "Lucci. Just in time. I almost thought you got held up by that Straw Hat kid. Take care of this filthy pirate and I'll make sure you're promoted to Vice Admiral at the very least." Spandam's joyful voice died with a strangled croak as the dust cleared. Lucci's arms were crooked, and his face was a mass of lumps and bruises. After a few seconds, his pigeon plummeted from the sky and landed on his chest. Luffy landed on the trembling bridge. His arm, still glowing with Hoki's umber glow, shrank back to its normal size as the air hissed. The red radiance on Luffy's skin subsided. He wiped a patch of blood from his chin, looked down at Lucci, and huffed wearily. He fumbled around Lucci's neck until he located the cord and yanked it off, saying, "Gimme that key. There. Now don't wake me until there's meat." Luffy fell backwards with key in his outstretched hand, snoozing as soon as his head struck the bridge. Spandam said, I surrender, please don't hurt me," after glancing down at Lucci and then back at Izuku. Taking Luffy's key, Izuku did. He put both sets to the test on the C-prism handcuffs that Frankie and Robin were wearing. Frankie's opened with Luffy's key, but Robin's stayed locked. "Super!" exclaimed Frankie. "I sure owe you guys one for coming all this way. Are my little bros okay?" "Last I saw them, they were fighting through the courthouse," Izuku stated. "What's the whole thing about Pluton anyways?" Frankie smiled slyly at him. Frankie opened his chest and held up a folded, weathered piece of parchment. He said, "Oh, nothing much. Tom happened to leave me 2 different blueprints when he passed, and when Spandam here asked me for it, I couldn't let this creep get his hands on these blueprints, so I gave him a different set of schematics. Good thing this idiot fell for it, right?" Spandam made no sound as his mouth moved. "You gave it to him, and that was our only way home," Izuku remarked, stifling his irritation. Frankie's grin faltered. He held up Pluton's parchment, and a tiny flame appeared on one of his fingertips. "I know. But between getting you 2 home or saving countless lives, I made my choice. But it doesn't matter now." The dry blueprint was eagerly consumed by the fire, and its ashes were dispersed by the wind. Before Izuku's glare stopped him cold, Spandam screamed as if his own son had just died in front of him and began to claw at the ashes. "I should have done that ages ago. I guess I couldn't let go of that one piece of the old man I had left." Izuku said, "You mind helping me with the truck?" Frankie removed the keys from his chest and twirled them around his finger, asking, "Why carry it? We have a perfectly good bridge, don't we?" Frankie turned on the ignition, and the truck roared to life. Driving toward the subterranean tunnel that crossed the gap between the bridge and the tower, the truck roared down the bridge, pushing Funkfried out of its way. Izuku stayed behind to help Robin stand up by draping Luffy over his shoulder. The gates of justice thundered behind him. There was a heavy grinding of stone on stone as they swung open. As the mechanisms within the gate moved actual tons of rock aside, massive gears clanked and ropes tensed. As the ocean surged into Eni's lobby and water gurgled, the whirlpools that were raging around the island subsided. At the gates, Spandam gaped. "No one's ever opened them all the way before," he said, panting. "Was it supposed to be for Robin?" Izuku heard Spandam laugh crazily and turned to look behind him. Cackling and pointing to the wall of white sails that rose over the horizon, Spandam was on his knees. Spandam exclaimed. The Buster call went through. "Get them. Destroy the Straw Hats. Burn the whole damn island down if you have to. Just kill them." Nico Robin slipped out of Izuku's arms after shivering violently. "Come on," said Izuku. "If that's the Buster call, we need to leave." "That's not a Buster call," Robin uttered softly. "There's only supposed to be 10 ships." Izuku counted as he looked back. Nearly half a dozen ships raced to the open gates. A bright light flashed at the foremost ship's prow. All the electrons in Izuku's body rang alarmingly. In half the time it took him to blink, he dropped Luffy, crossed his arms, and prepared for impact. His vision was filled with a bright flash. With the impact of a meteor, a fist struck his raised guard. A 20-foot-long crater was gouged by the blow, which knocked him off his feet, sent him straight into the stone bridge, and sent him flying again. Izuku slammed and skidded across the stone as he ragdolled across hundreds of feet of bridge. He saw a smear of bright red. Izuku clenched his jaw, twisted in midair, put his feet down, and skidded to a halt within 10 feet of the monstrous truck. It was like an overzealous chef using a meat tenderizer all over his body. He slowly stretched everything in an attempt to find any broken bones. His vision was a little blurry from all the blows to his head, and the sides of his arms were covered in a huge bruise, but he felt nothing that would prevent him from fighting. Izuku inhaled deeply before sprinting back down the bridge. Izuku's fear increased with each crater and fractured boulder, but he was unable to flee between his fallen friends in front of him and the vulnerable truck behind him. A tanned, wrinkled man in a yellow suit with stripes, wearing gold-tinted sunglasses, and carrying a Marine Admiral's cloak over his shoulders waited at the end of the bridge. Izuku approached cautiously, and he cocked his head. Drawling, "Oh, you're a fast one," Kizaru said. "I thought I saw a bit of hockey when I hit you." Izuku asked, wiping perspiration from his brow, "Who are you?" "The name's Borsellino, but on the job, you can call me Admiral Kizaru." "I'm Izuku Midoriya. I've read your bounty posters." He furrowed his brow. "You know, I can't help but wonder how it is that someone as young as you has a decades-old bounty poster. Are you just the man's kid, coasting on their reputation, or did you get on the wrong end of a devil fruit?" Izuku tried to come up with a response. Time travel felt too risky to bring up, but he wanted to continue the conversation, if only to gain more time to study his opponent. His hesitancy spoke for him. Rolling his neck and shoulders, Borsellino made his joints crackle and shook his head, saying, "Doesn't really matter, does it? The world government says you're a threat, and it's my job to deal with those. You know, I'd rather just take Nico Robin and leave. I don't think you're fast enough to stop me." The smallest movement caused Izuku to stiffen and prepare for Soru. Kizaru sighed and replied, "Unfortunately, you're looking like you'll be quite the problem in the future. If I don't clean up this mess right here and right now, I'll have even more work to do later. And let me tell you, there's nothing I don't like more than working overtime. I don't exactly have the most fun job in the world." Izuku jumped on any opportunity to carry on the conversation and asked, "Then why did? If you hate working for them so much, why not quit?" Borsellino scratched his head and said, "Oh, why not? Well, it's like living in a house. It's so much easier to never wash the dishes, or never take out the trash. That's a metaphor for pirates, by the way, and let it all pile up. But if you do that, then living in your house becomes so much of a bother that you have no choice but to clean up. By that point, getting everything clean is much harder than it would have been to keep it clean in the first place." Izuku took offense at the remark. "Is that what you think we are? Trash? I thought I made that pretty clear. You're worthless, destructive, and refuse to mend your ways. What else is there to do but dispose of you?" Izuku briefly returned to the playground and was referred to as a worthless Deku. A part of him screamed at the frightful figure in front of him, who had almost killed him with a single blow. Then he recalled dragging cannonballs, recalling Rayleigh's lessons, and recalling yelling with Luffy about his aspirations to be a hero. With his fists balled, Izuku remarked, "Maybe I was worthless once. Everyone else thought so. But I've come a long way from the tiny weakling everyone picked on." Borsellino's eyebrow went up. "Oh? Is that so?" Izuku gathered lightning around his arms and charged in response. Izuku charged towards Kizaru, who froze in place. Izuku made a fist swing. Kizaru's face opened up around his arm like a hologram. Izuku barely had time to comprehend that he was up against a Logia, and he braced himself just in time to take the uppercut Kizaru delivered to his ribs. Izuku hurled a lightning spear at Kizaru as they flew through the air. Kizaru's position instantly shifted sideways, making the spear appear sloth-like even though it struck with the speed of a thunderbolt. The stone was broken by the bolt. Sharp stones flew through Kizaru, but he didn't bother to move. Izuku resumed his assault as soon as his feet touched the ground. Haki slowly relaxed his clenched fingers, but Kizaru was forced to dodge rather than just stand there by the faint remnants of black gleam. Even though Haki was a threat, Kizaru appeared unfazed by Izuku's ferocious, quick punches. He swayed back and forth, allowing Izuku's fists to brush against his coat or hair, but never taking even a glance. Kizaru said, "You should just give up," while he leaned around Izuku's kick. "That way, I don't have to break every bone in your body before handing you over to Magellan." Izuku had heard enough terrifying tales of what happened to pirates under the Marine's command to ever entertain giving in to their brand of justice, no matter how much the threat chilled him. Rather, he punched with one arm and threw a brace of thunderbolts off the other. Between the blows, Kizaru appeared, glinting like a mirage before slipping past Izuku's defense. Izuku was struck hard in the chest before he could react. Izuku heaved and retched, forcing himself to remain upright while wiping a trickle of saliva from his chin. After giving him a quick glance, Kizaru said, "Face it, kid, you're too slow. This is your last chance before I start breaking ribs." Izuku saw that he was correct. No matter how many attacks he launched, Kizaru was quick enough to avoid them all. But he had to be able to see the attacks coming in order to dodge. He would have an opening if he could somehow blind him or conceal an impending attack. Izuku took a quick look around the bridge. There were several pistols and rifles strewn about, and some bullets had cracked open, splattering black powder. He had no use for the guns themselves, but the loose powder inspired him. With a roar and doubled punches, Izuku pushed Kizaru in the direction of the strewn-about guns. Kizaru continued to punch, but Izuku clenched his jaw and continued. "Is this really the best you can do? Just throw more punches and hope I put my face right in front of them?" Izuku kicked and swept low. Kizaru did not see Izuku's hand closing around a grit-filled pile of black powder as he leapt over it. A dab of tear bomb from the pouch at his waist gave his pinch-coated palm a little more vigor. "Eat this!" Flashbang! Izuku yelled as he charged at Kizaru, channeling his inner Kachan. Izuku sparked his hand. Before his hand was burned by a flash of fire, Izuku had a moment to think that perhaps it was not a good idea to set off gunpowder in his own hand and to use Tekai frantically. Kizaru's eyes widened for a moment before he was completely engulfed in smoke. Izuku swung a fist into the dense smoke, pushing through the pain. He smashed his hand through the void. Izuku continued to swing, punching until the smoke cleared and the sea was clearly visible. He sprang back, only to discover in the middle of the leap that he had landed squarely in Kizaru's fist. Izuku barely loosened himself enough to prevent his spine from breaking completely as it bowed back. Like a fish without bones, he tripped over Kizaru's arm and staggered to his feet. Kizaru took his coat off. "You're making me really tempted to simply kill you and be done with it. Do you have any idea how long it takes to get one of these coats freshly laundered? The staff complain every time I make them clean it. I'd simply do without, but then Sengoku complains if I look anything less than perfect and makes an even bigger hassle for me." In retrospect, Izuku understood that if the Admiral could just move far away before Izuku could even take advantage of the opportunity, blocking his sight would not accomplish much. As he combed through everything he had seen thus far, his mind raced for any potential flaws. He was aware that he was facing a Logia, but he couldn't pinpoint the kind. The movement was linear but too quick to follow. Izuku needed to test the limits of Kizaru's agility to see what would happen. It was really challenging to use Kami-e and Soru simultaneously. His body wanted to ragdoll everywhere, and his arms whipped around dangerously every time he took a sharp turn. However, the price was that Kizaru's punch missed for the first time during the fight. Izuku commented that Kizaru's linear, fixed movements struggled to adapt to random variables as his fist whistled past his nose. Even so, Izuku couldn't concentrate on Soru, Kami-e, and Haki. Without either of them noticing, any blow he might have delivered would have gone straight through Kizaru. Izuku was distracted from his thoughts by a side punch. Izuku bowed, but he could only bend sideways so long before he was rendered breathless by a sharp crack. Izuku clutched his fractured rib as he came to a halt. Kizaru scratched his head and said, "One down, 300 to go. Counting seems like too much effort. Just make sure to tell people I broke every bone you've got and I'll stop when I think I've broken enough, alright?" With a growl, Izuku stood up. He was aware that his attempt to outmaneuver Kizaru was a good one, but he was limited in how he could maneuver around the Admiral on the ground. But he would have 3 dimensions to work with in the air. Izuku watched Kizaru intently while kicking into the air. While covering his eyes with his hand, Kizaru remarked, "You better not make me come up there." Izuku responded by hurling a thunderbolt. "I don't mind waiting for you to come down. You can't stay up there forever," Kizaru said, allowing it to pass through him. Izuku swore in his head. His body felt lighter than ever after all the practice he had with Geppo, but he was on a short timer because of the broken rib and the amount of work Soru put in. Kizaru would have to land since there was no way to make him leave the bridge. The gouges in the stonework caught Izuku's attention. Aiming for the bridge, he hurled another lightning bolt. One of the boulders broke off and fell into the ocean. More thunderbolts came down from Izuku. Rocks flew into the air as the stone split. Whole sections of the bridge sloughed off into the sea, and there were craters all over it. Kizaru sighed, surveying the increasing damage. He vanished into a ray of light as the area he was standing on crumbled into gravel. Taken by surprise, Izuku flew through the air, his face imprinted with Kizaru's bootprint. "You're really going to make me work hard for this one, aren't you?" And here I was, looking forward to getting a break for once. A glob of blood was spat out by Izuku, who declared, "I'm not letting you hurt any of my friends." "Funny. You say that like you could stop me." Kizaru blinked ahead. The punch clipped Izuku's shoulder as he fell. Izuku let himself fall through the air and scurried in any direction. As Kizaru continued to shoot at him like a bouncing laser, he curved around in the air, allowing the wind to push him. While Kizaru hadn't broken any other bones, Izuku's collection of bruises grew as the minutes passed, and his own flailing punches failed to find purchase, always a second too slow to catch the pursuing light. The open ocean was the setting for their game of cat and mouse. Hoping for a blow that would knock Kizaru into the sea, Izuku dove and swerved as close to the water as he dared. Izuku had to desperately Soru with the other foot to get himself airborne before weakness overtook him after one of his legs was knocked into the ocean by a kick from Kizaru. As he waited for Izuku to regain his breath, Kizaru cracked his neck and said, "If you could just dive right in, that would be great. I've got plenty of marines to fish you out." Izuku scurried back toward the surf. His dip in the ocean gave him another idea, but he knew he couldn't hit Kizaru. Izuku struck the ocean with enough force to slap the water with a wall of pressurized air when he sensed Kizaru hot on his trail. A wave kicked up in a giant crater around him, before rushing back together and jabbing the air with a watery spear. Izuku did not see Kizaru when he turned to look behind him. When observation Haki alerted him, he was searching the water, wondering how he would prevent the admiral from drowning. Izuku dodged a blow to the head with a twist. Observation and armament hockey. Who boy did Roger turn you into one scary pirate? Izuku swiped his leg in response. The air around him cleaved as the leg stretched unnaturally and diffused into a crackling whip of electricity. Kizaru easily dodged the attack, which was as quick and wide as it was, and then came in for another blow. The admiral scraped his cheek raw, and Izuku yelled. Izuku ran off in the direction of the ships, having nowhere else to go. The Marines fired, showering him with bullets and launching sea prism bullets at him, but Kizaru was unable to pursue him closely due to the close-quarters ship formation and the barrage of projectiles. He was unable to defeat Kizaru. He was informed of this by bruises all over his body and a cracked rib. However, he could give the admiral something else to worry about. He hurled a thunderbolt into the rudder of a frigate while he was circling a ship. Because the broken rudder was stuck in a turning position, the ship listed sideways. The other ships frantically steered away, but one ship got clipped by the damaged frigate's prow and got stuck against it. Izuku swept from ship to ship, igniting gunpowder barrels, burning masts, and sweeping men off the ship while Kizaru followed him all the time. As ships floundered in the open waters, the frigates behind them, ignoring their plight, plowed straight through them towards Eni's lobby. Izuku gasped, pausing to look around and orient himself on the battlefield. Finding Haki yelled at him. Izuku turned. A force beyond description, propelled by the tremendous momentum that photons traveling at the speed of light can produce, barely missed his head and traveled straight down his shoulder. Izuku felt his collarbone crack, then a leg broke from the sheer speed at which he crashed into the water. The cold exhaustion of the sea snuck up on him, and his entire body ached. With all its watery weight, the ocean crushed him, pulling him toward its depths, far worse than the sea prism cuffs. Izuku could feel his thoughts slowing down, the hundredths of seconds passing through his head vanishing like sand grains, getting faster and faster, like an hourglass shattering and leaking its contents all over the place. Izuku's last epiphany was that his good arm was still above the water. The ocean had not yet filled in the column of air left by the impact's sheer force. Izuku twitched his fingers. He struggled to breathe, even if it meant choking on seawater, as his lungs begged for oxygen. Floored a smash. Izuku swung around with a final, desperate surge of strength. The sea roared. After hacking and chomping on seawater, Izuku inhaled a new breath and felt alive once more. Izuku's head felt lightheaded and his eyelids fluttered, but as a ship's deck approached, he spun around and struck it feet first. Disoriented by his abrupt appearance, the Marines paused for a few seconds before launching an assault. Izuku held his ground, bending around Haki and Sea Prism and punching Marines so hard that they were thrown onto another ship because his right leg was unable to bear his weight. A beam of light struck him in the middle of the punch. Mid-flight, Izuku was struck by another fist after crashing through the ship's mast. He went through the railing with a crash. One more fist. Like a volleyball, Kizaru kicked Izuku up, down, and back and forth. He slammed him into the ocean, spiked him through ships, and then kicked him back into the air at the last second. Izuku huddled close to himself, concentrating on Tekai. Kizaru's punches cracked his feeble defenses and the bones underneath. His nose crumpled like an accordion, his teeth flew out in a spray of blood, and a gut punch that fed him his own colon caused lunch to violently spout out of him. Izuku fought to stay conscious as he felt it slipping away. Kizaru grabbed the collar of his shirt and immediately pulled him to a stop. Izuku couldn't remember how many times he felt something snap, but the figure felt right, and that's 300. Some of those might be repeats, was Kizaru's statement. Maybe I should break some more to be sure. Screw you, wheezed Izuku. For his trouble, he received another fist to the ribs. You know, I was in the middle of a good book when they called me, and now, I'm going to have to fill out so many forms for all those ships you broke. I'm really not happy with you right now. Sorry about that. I woke up in a metal box, and my day only went downhill from there, so I'm not happy either. Kizaru gave an eye roll. He took out a transponder snail and replied, yeah, I got the kid. It's the rumble one, like they said. No, I don't see the other one, do I really need to find, but only if you do the paperwork for me. You're the best. Kizaru sighed and replied, right, let's get you in some cuffs. I get you processed first, but looks like you made a mess of the courtroom, so I'll just use my authority as admiral to declare you guilty of all charges. Sounds good. Izuku struggled to free his arms, but Kizaru's hold held firm. I'll take that as a yes, it was nice knowing you kid, hope you don't. Kizaru saw it first, but Izuku saw it a split second later. Over Kizaru's shoulder, The view was a dazzling gleam of light. Kizaru swung, his arms and legs fading into the light, only to bounce off the mirror as it flew in his direction. Like a giant fly swatter, Mei lowered a huge mirror. Even though Izuku was protected from the blunt force trauma caused by the glass wall by being beneath Kizaru, he nevertheless plunged into the water alongside Kizaru. Izuku was pulled out of the water by Mei's robotic hand before seawater filled his lungs. She remained in the air thanks to flame dials that were fastened to her feet and back like rockets. "You still alive, Izuku?" she said as she snaked out of the way of the cannonballs. "I think so. We got the truck back and loaded up. Let's get out of here." The idea of finally leaving brought tears to Izuku's eyes. As they took off, he glanced at the ocean. Dozens of Marines jumped in after Kizaru, whose admiral coat bobbed in the waves. Chopper rushed over him as soon as Mei placed him beside the train, splinting his body, repositioning bone fragments, and force-feeding him a gallon of milk. Izuku felt his bones blending together like moist lumps of clay as his teeth sank back in. He made a fist with his bloodied fingers as he flexed them experimentally, even though every muscle in his body ached inexplicably with each movement. "We need to get out of here. None of us can take on Kizaru." At the mention of the Admiral, Frankie and the other Frankie brothers blanched. They were joined in glaring horror by Nami and Usopp, and even Robin grew restless. "Where is he? No one hurts my friends and gets away with it," Luffy yelled, slamming his fists together. Izuku remarked, "You can beat him up some other time. Right now, we need to leave." Luffy glanced at him and gave him a nod. "Right. We beat up some bad guys and trashed their place. Let's get some meat and party." As Kokora blew the whistle and activated Rocketman, the Frankie brothers all applauded. The truck lashed to the roof as it chugged slowly, carrying the weight of all the people inside, but in a matter of seconds it was gliding over the floating rails toward Water 7. Nami watched the weather while everyone rejoicing and talking about getting even with the Marines. As a result, she was the first to notice white sails coming into view. Nami yelled, "They're blockading the rails. We'll crash right into them." "Nagagaga. I can feel the rails whipping around. They cut the lines." Usopp and Chopper both screamed, "We're gonna crash. Is there a way we can hold the rails together?" Izuku asked, turning to face Mei. In her hand, Mei lit a dial. "It will be simple to weld them back together because they are hollow aluminum tubes, but first we must clear the ships." "We could use a cannon to shoot them," Usopp sobbed. "What cannon?" Nami slapped him across the head. "We're traveling by train." "I don't think I can hit them from here," Izuku said, glancing toward the horizon. "Sure you can. You have electricity, don't you?" Mei responded. Yeah. But air's not a good conductor, and my charge fizzles out over long distances." Railgun. Izuku had a mental block. The ramifications of using electromagnetism to fire metal shrapnel struck him when it rebooted. "Zoro, cut off a piece of the train for me, would you?" Izuku went up to the roof and gave the lump of metal to Luffy. "Drop it when I say to." Holding the metal over Izuku's chest, Luffy nodded. Izuku created electron clouds out of his arms. Izuku willed his arms to stretch into two long rails, pointing straight at the fleet that was waiting, despite the protests of bruises and battered flesh. As Nami read the wind patterns, Izuku had Usopp stand behind him, modifying his aim. Nami stated, "It's holding steady, you have 1 minute before it changes. And you're all lined up. Make sure we don't hit a wave before firing." Concerned about potential railgun retaliation, they stepped out from behind Izuku. Izuku placed his feet firmly on the train's roof and fixed his gaze on the approaching sails. Izuku's instinct told him it wasn't time to fire, even though the sea was perfectly calm and there was no wind. He continued to wait. He was on the verge of giving up and firing anyway when he had a sudden sense of righteousness. He prayed and threw down his arms all the charge he could muster. Izuku felt as though someone had yanked him violently off his feet and tied a rope around his chest. The shriek of wind whistling past his ears was followed by a deafening explosion. He was unable to open his eyes due to the air buffeting him, and when he eventually managed to pry them open, he saw only a smear of brown before his entire world disintegrated in a shower of seawater, screaming Marines, and wooden splinters. Clawing at the wooden plank that hung between him and the cold embrace of the sea, Izuku shivered like a drowned rat. His arms were strong enough to pull him out of the water even though his legs were locked up. "There he is!" exclaimed a Marine. "Open fire!" Izuku jumped to his feet and japoed to the floating piece of the ship's deck that had survived the impact, not trusting his devil fruit to help him at the moment. The Marine firing line was knocked into the sea with a single sweep of his leg. Izuku noticed more ships when he looked around. He thought he had thrown himself backwards into the pursuing ships and gritted his teeth in frustration. He broke the bow of a ship with a lightning bolt in one direction and hopped onto another. In a matter of seconds, the surrounding fleet was reduced to marines treading water and bobbing timbers. With May encircling one arm and a bundle of planks in the other, Luffy leapt over. May leapt off to weld the rails back together after he placed the wood next to them. Izuku took a moment to think. Wait, what are you guys doing back here? May remarked, you got the charge backwards, nearly took the mast off with that backwards shot. Izuku looked over the horizon and said, oh, oops. I hope I didn't hit anything important. Squeezing the last of the seawater from his cloak, Kizaru shook himself off at the speed of light. The moisture that was still on him evaporated in the heat. Kizaru reflected, didn't even register her as a threat, got too lazy for my own good. Sir? Our intercepting fleet has cut the rails, but they might have another way back. What are your orders? We keep after them. Failure is not an option, and Sengoku would. Kizaru stopped. All he saw were empty seas and clear skies, but he sensed a foreboding sense of danger approaching. As he waited for whatever threat he sensed to materialize, he slipped into light speed and watched the world crawl. When he saw it, he nearly gave up and switched back. The metal shrapnel crept along, as if it floated in honey, the world all but still. He scratched his hair as he hovered beside it, watching its steady crawl towards his ship, wondering how something so slow could be dangerous. He anticipated that it would clatter off or perhaps become lodged in the prow when it struck the ship. As the metal pushed its way through the thick beam, he was surprised to see the wood crack and splinter. The force of the impact rippled across the ship's prow, causing cracks to run up the entire ship and splinters to explode out in slow motion. The deck gave way. As the wood flew out from under the marines' feet and they floated languidly into the air, their faces changed into slow expressions of horror. As the metal projectile sped through the ship, Kizaru watched. In the path of the metal scrap, every wall, barrel, keg, and sandwich a marine bit into before the projectile tore it from between his teeth disintegrated. It smashed through the keel, and as it got close to the water, the sea opened up in its path, as if an invisible wall pushed everything away. Kizaru didn't realize how gravely he had messed up until he sped back up. With a thunderclap that was both deafeningly loud and strong enough to split the waves into a huge canyon, the metal struck the ocean. Ships on either side capsized, tossing their crews overboard as the water heaved. Marines had to seek cover as timbers and water rained down in a lethal shower that penetrated decks and sails. Ships were impaled by broken masts and pieces of keel, which caused them to float and collide with ships behind them. Within a second, half of Kizaru's fleet had been destroyed by a single scrap of metal. Kizaru performed some mental calculations while observing the broken ships and drowning crews. Kizaru sighed and began fishing his subordinates out of the ocean after calculating the bounties on the Straw Hats, comparing them to the expenses of recruiting and training every marine currently stranded in the waves, and comparing the time required to find and grind each straw hat into hamburger with the time required to complete the mortuary forms and sign the pre-made letters to grieving families. Izuku wanted to go home. It was first awaiting the healing process of his mangled body. After that, it assisted May in assembling the monster truck, the DeLorean, and Rocketman into an interdimensional battering ram. Izuku held the wrenches for May as she stared at the docking system Frankie was working on and demanded to assist him. The Straw Hats sent the Marines packing with colorful masks, dusty bedsheets, and colorful commentary from Usopp about legions of undead and the displeased souls of pirates that the Marines had executed after they searched the town for them. Months passed. Until Nami beat them both black and blue for overcrowding the living quarters, May and Frankie used the rising ship as their own playground, adding energy beams, grappling hooks, flamethrowers, and soda-powered rockets. While Zoro and Sanji practiced on Rokushiki and worked on unlocking their own haki, Izuku and Luffy trained, refining haki and testing out their devil fruit abilities. Izuku reminded himself that they had a time machine every time he thought of home and felt bad about waiting so long to go back. They could stay as long as they wanted and come back as soon as they were done. Somehow, May had managed to find a large enough tarp to cover the entire ship. After helping to hammer the deck together, they were sufficiently familiar with its appearance, but Izuku was astounded to see the completed ship sparkle in the sunlight as Frankie and May threw the tarp off the ship. Like the Oro Jackson, the Thousand Sunny had a regal demeanor. It had a silent strength in every plank that would carry its crew through the roughest seas. Giant spinning wheels that doubled as emergency propulsion and docks for smaller vessels, giant vents out the back for a coup de burst, a tangerine grove that shrouded the upper decks in greenery, and a silly, derpy-eyed lion figurehead that Luffy had not stopped him from adding his artistic flair to were just a few of the ship's oddball features. Izuku and Mei sat back while the Straw Hats gawked at their new ship and hurried to inspect their private areas. Although they both knew they wouldn't be sailing with them, the ship had room for them both, including an additional workshop next to Frankie's and another desk in the medical room. Chopper waved from the ship's deck. "What's the matter? Aren't you coming up?" When Izuku said, "It's time we left," Luffy turned his head away from the figurehead. "What are you talking about, silly? There's plenty of room on board. We can bring your time machine and send you back anytime you want," the helicopter said as it became motionless. "We have to go really fast for it to work," Mei clarified, "and there aren't any other trains in the world. Here's the only place we can make it work." Chopper started to cry, but Zoro placed a soft hand on his shoulder before he could protest further. "Guess we better say goodbye then." "Goodbye feast. Goodbye feast," Luffy yelled as he jumped up. Zoro laughed. "You heard the captain, shitty cook." Sanji gave Zoro a foot swat. "Yeah, whatever. Give me a bit and I'll have something whipped up." The Straw Hats rushed to their seats. Sanji kept teasing Zoro for cutting the meats and veggies in different sizes, while Nami went out to bargain for more meat. Sanji received ham rolls, deviled eggs, and cheese slices from the Frankie family in a matter of minutes, and the aroma of fried fish and roasting meat promised more substantial fare in the future. Zoro carried a keg of beer over each shoulder as Frankie rolled out enormous kegs of soda. Chopper marveled at Sanji's sugary treats. Nami swept through the crowd snatching wallets. Robin sat back reading a book while Sanji hurried to refill her martini glass. Usopp posed atop a keg and regaled everyone with stories of his valor. The sense of the celebration filled the city as the sun sank toward the waves. The shipwrights of Galila came down to admire the Thousand Sunny, and while most people were still afraid of the pirates, their curiosity and hunger were replaced by fear. The small gathering quickly grew into a citywide celebration. Butchers and cooks brought down roasts and shanks and massive piles of meat, while enterprising bartenders and innkeepers hurried barrels of liquor down from the city. As the sun sank, the shoreline erupted in cheers and laughter as inebriated shipwrights and townspeople mixed with brigands and pirates. By the time the celebration ended, the sun had already set. While some lay where they had fainted, others dragged themselves home. The Straw Hats stayed up, sitting around a small campfire, roasting marshmallows, sausages, and mushrooms over the flames while telling stories, while the majority of the Frankie family was asleep. Izuku shared the more commonplace details of his world, including his favorite heroes, school, cell phones, cars, and other modern conveniences, while Chopper oohed and awed at every triumphant lie Usopp told. Robin also told everyone about Ohara and the researchers there. As everyone else gathered to bid farewell, Mei made some last-minute adjustments after the embers subsided. Chopper sniffed, ran, and put his small arms around Izuku's waist. "You better come back and visit, you hear?" Izuku ruffled his hair and laughed. "We have loads of trucks back home. We'll come back again sometime." Nami put her arms around Izuku. "Don't forget to pay back the interest you owe me when you do." "My wallet's in my shoe," Izuku stated unemotionally. "I know. Already nicked the berries out of there this morning." Izuku muttered a curse before realizing that the money wouldn't be accepted in his world anyhow. "You couldn't even let me keep some as a souvenir?" Nami's cheeks puffed out. "You're already bringing back a bunch of gold. You don't need any more. You better tell everyone you meet about the great Captain Usopp, leader of 80 million men," Usopp said, putting an arm around his shoulder. "Which part? The part where you got drugged and had to get rescued like a princess, or that time the bedsheet got caught on a door and you jumped off the boat?" Usopp yelled. "That was totally a ghost and you know it. Bedsheets don't moan and grab at you." Sanji let out a flick of his cigarette on the floor. "If there's so much as a scratch on Mei Swan next time she visits, I'm taking it out of your hide. You'll have to be able to hit me first. Yeah, laugh it up you Logia cheater. I'll have hockey mastered by the time you're back." "Same goes for me," Zoro promised. "In fact, I'll master it way before the Merimo does." Bold words for someone who can't even find the bathroom, Mosshead. "Not my fault you guys keep moving it, curly brows." Robin laughed as he observed Zoro and Sanji fighting in the background, adding, "They're a lively bunch. Guess it won't be too much quieter around here without you around. Want me to bring back some books from my world?" Robin's eyes went wide with shock. "That would be lovely. Seeing another world's history would be a fascinating perspective." "Screw books!" exclaimed Frankie. "Bring back a giant robot." Luffy's and Chopper's eyes brightened. "Giant robot, giant robot." The cobbled-together mecha that had survived Eni's lobby and Alabasta was patted by May. Sure will. And it'll be way bigger and way shinier than this one. Will it have lasers? Lots? Cool. After blowing the whistle, Frankie started Rocketman's engines. Next stop, another world. The DeLorean was right in front of Rocketman. The monster truck was mounted on a different vehicle, secured with rigging around the side. The truck would disconnect from the rigging and collide with the DeLorean at the touch of a switch. Izuku and Mei said their final goodbyes and clambered into the DeLorean. While the wheels churned and laboriously pushed the heavy load forward, the engines belched and puffed steam. As Rocketman accelerated, the Straw Hats followed, initially walking and then running. The Straw Hats fell behind, one by one. Usopp stumbled and fell face first into the sand. Nami lost a shoe. Chopper changed into Walk Point only to get stuck in the sand. Zoro and Sanji fought over who stopped first, and Robin was content to just wave from a distance. As the DeLorean's speedometer steadily approached 88, Luffy, in second gear and speeding ahead with Soru, was racing neck and neck with Rocketman. Luffy cried out, "Oi, Izuku, Mei, go kick some butt and bring back lots of meat," he yelled, waving his hat in the air. "You got it, Luffy," Izuku yelled back, leaning out of the window. "You better be the Pirate King when I get back. And you'll be the #1 superhero, with lasers coming out of your eyes and everything." Izuku questioned, "What is it with you guys and lasers? Have they even been invented yet here?" Calling out, "This is the captain speaking," Mei said. "Please keep your heads and arms inside the car, turn off all cell phones, and fasten your seatbelts as we are getting close to dimensional warp velocity." Before ducking back inside the car, Izuku waved to Luffy and the others one last time, feeling both giddy and nervous as he watched the needle steadily rise toward 88. "Because we're older, do you think they'll let us skip a grade?" Mei inquired. "We'll be lucky if they don't hold us back," Izuku moaned. "It has been nearly 2 years since we last studied. Anyway, why would you need to know that stuff? We have babies designed to memorize all of that information for us, so why should we bother learning all that nonsense about trigonometry and world wars? Are you still upset that they forced you to attend school? I certainly am. How many children could I have produced in the time I spent behind a desk? 270 a year times 8 years Issa? At an average rate of 1 baby every 8 hours, and you know I can do faster." An electric charge permeated the car, giving Izuku a lung-squeezing sensation of pressure. Mei smiled. "Here we go. Either that or we perish." "What? Hold on." A button was pressed by Mei, and the monster truck pulled away from the temporary rigging and slid back into the DeLorean. As soon as it touched down, Izuku felt himself squeezed through a small tube, just as the first time, and after a second that seemed to go on forever, he popped out again, floating in his seat while the wind whistled through the broken window. "We are obviously falling. How did the falling get forgotten?" Izuku inquired. "Actually, that's better than what I thought would happen." Izuku scowled at Mei and said, "Explain." "Well, we were a mile above the ground when we entered the other world, correct? It makes sense that we might have appeared a mile below the surface of the Earth since we came back from the sea level of the other world. And that wasn't something you considered telling me? You worry excessively. In addition, we would have been 2 miles up here if we had attempted to return from a mile above the ground." Izuku inhaled and exhaled slowly. "Okay. Fine, but if something you're doing could get us killed, I would appreciate it if you let me know. I mean, anything I make can spontaneously explode, so besides that." "Oh, okay then." They sat in the car for a while, gazing out at the cloudscape. Mei continued, "So, are you going to do something about the whole gravity situation?" Izuku let out a groan. "You didn't pack a parachute?" Mei gave the back of a huge power drill a pat. "Thought we'd be below ground, remember? What about oxygen? Did you even think about that? This baby could dig a hole to the US before we'd run out of air. And if that didn't work, then you could punch our way out." Izuku's nose was pinched, through a mile of rock. With how fast you can punch and how much rock each punch can displace, yes. Izuku sighed and remarked, "I hate that you might be right. You want to try testing it? Absolutely not. Fine. I'll make a punching baby next and I'll punch a hole to the US. What is it with you in the US? Are you going to stop us from turning into a DeLorean pancake or not?" Izuku gave an eye roll. Izuku leapt out as soon as Mei rolled down the window. They had just broken through the clouds and could see Japan clearly. Izuku pushed the vehicle until they were pointing in Musudafu's direction. Izuku leapt beneath the car and used Geppo as they approached. Izuku's legs burned from kicking on air so forcefully that it was enough to lift a car. but he overcame it because he had some hockey in his legs. The car hopped a couple of times before descending more slowly. A very familiar car was darting through the streets when Izuku looked down. "Mei!" Izuku exclaimed as he peered out the window. "I thought you said you adjusted the time correctly." "To the day. We should have gotten here right after we left." "Look down." So did Mei. "Huh. I guess the two worlds' days are just a tiny bit off. Whoops. What do we do? We got lucky with Luffy, but right now there's two of us, we remember that not happening." "Relax. We're about to leave, see?" Izuku observed. The sight of that truck speeding in their direction was completely unsettling. As the DeLorean led them on their perilous voyage to a different world, he sensed the electric spark. Additionally, he witnessed the truck drastically deviate from its intended path and veer toward a pedestrian-filled sidewalk. One person stumbled, but the majority scurried aside. They watched in horror as the truck sped in their direction. Izuku muttered curses to himself. He blitzed to the ground, threw the DeLorean up, and soared the pedestrian out of the way. After that, he planted his feet firmly on the ground, used Tekai to support himself, and grasped the truck. Gritting his teeth, he forced the truck to stop, shifted its momentum upward, lifted it over his head, and then put it back on the road. He struggled throughout to prevent his head from blowing up. Around him, in a discordant cacophony, every wire, cell phone, automobile, and building was a maze of electrical circuits. Izuku thought that cats scratching on chalkboards were all around him. Izuku jumped back into the air as soon as he decided that everyone was safe. He held out his arms and the DeLorean fell into them. In an attempt to stop as much of its momentum as possible before they hit the ground, he kicked frantically. Hockey eased the DeLorean back to the ground, preventing Izuku from breaking through the cracks in the concrete beneath his feet. Then Izuku fell on his back. Mei leapt out and gave him a foot tap. "What gives with that landing? Those electronics are delicate, Izuku." Izuku let out a groan. "Your fault for not making it fly. Or, adding a parachute." Mei sighed, then turned to see that traffic was stopped all around them. "Yikes. What happened here?" "We happened. You drove onto the wrong side of the road, remember?" "Oh. Oops." With a grunt, Izuku got back up on his feet. A few people had their phones out, and the entire crowd was staring at the scene. He was even being stared at like the second coming of Christ by a thin, blonde man. Izuku said, "Everyone all right? Sorry about that, just a mishap with a new invention." "Very impressive." Startled by the voice behind him, Izuku leapt. Hawks was standing on top of the DeLorean, playing with a red feather and glancing at him. "Oh my gosh, it's Hawks," exclaimed Izuku. "Can I have your autograph?" Hawks blinked. Then he chuckled. "Got something for me to sign?" Before realizing his notebooks hadn't fared well in another world, Izuku felt around for his hero notes. When Hawks saw his dejected expression, he said, "Hey, cheer up. You might get another chance." "Really? Yep. I gotta take you in for public quirk usage, after all." "But I don't have a—" Izuku stopped in the middle of the sentence that had come out of his mouth out of habit. "Oh, whoops." Hawks didn't hold out for a police car. He just walked Mei and Izuku 2 blocks down to the police station. When the pro-hero entered, the officer behind the front desk shook his head. What was the point of sending out that dispatch if you weren't going to wait for them? "They're just kids. No trouble handling them myself." The cop let out a sigh. "Fine. Get them in the holding cell. Their parents are on the way." Izuku felt a flutter in his stomach. He would see his mother again at last. He would accept it, even if it came from behind bars, after spending 2 years lost in a different world. Hawks slipped Izuku a piece of paper bearing his signature after the bars had slid shut. "Don't trade it away for cigs and toilet wine, alright kiddos?" As soon as they were by themselves, Izuku said, "I'm having an intrusive thought." Mei added, "About busting out of here. Feels weird not doing anything when people say I'm under arrest." An officer in a tan overcoat opened the doors for them after 30 minutes. "That was fast," said Izuku. The officer remarked, "Just getting your statement, we have a lot of conflicting reports about what happened." He escorted them to a room for questioning. As the detective organized his notes, Izuku helped himself to the water and granola bars that were left out. "Izuku. Mei. I am Detective Tsukauchi. Before we begin, I am obligated to inform you that I have a lie detection quirk. While this isn't a formal interrogation, I have no ability to turn off my quirk and will be able to tell if you lie to me. Do you understand? Can it tell if someone is lying even though they believe they're telling the truth? What about partial truths? Does it work through electronic devices? Or what about habitual responses like when someone says they're good when? Sukauchi extended his hand. Almost grinning, he said, I'm not allowed to divulge any of that information. Good questions though. Izuku's cheeks flushed. Thanks. So, who was driving the vehicle? Mei held up her hand. And how exactly did your vehicle end up in the air? Mei and Izuku looked at each other. Neither of them had considered what they would say to the world when they returned, and neither of them believed that it was wise to spread the word about dimension hopping and time travel. The car was a new invention of mine. It malfunctioned and teleported us into the air instead of where we were supposed to go. Sukauchi gave a nod. And what was this vehicle of yours supposed to do? Mei paused. There was a knock on the door before she could respond. Izuku nearly didn't recognize the pro-hero entering, but Eraserhead was the only one who could be identified by the capture scarf wrapped around him and the goggles around his neck. The UA principal was perched on his shoulder, almost concealed by swaths of scarf. Detective, I thought you knew better than to interrogate minors without parental consent. That infuriated Sukauchi, who said, I'm just getting a basic statement. I understand. As a UA student, I regret to notify you that Hatsume's inventions are protected by the university's patent protection program. You have no right to investigate further because the speeding is a minor civil infraction and the only criminal charge is 1 count of quirk usage by a minor in a life-threatening circumstance. I will inform the chief, Sukauchi said, nodding. As long as UA is prepared to accept responsibility, so I don't see any problems. Great. Please pardon me while I speak with my new students. After the detective left, Izuku said, Are we actually UA students? Eraserhead took the detective's seat, and Nezu leapt onto the table. 15 minutes prior. I'm happy I looked into your situation after receiving a call from a friend. Access to a time machine and whatever resource you discovered that grants quirks is the last thing the HPSC needs. Izuku's veins began to freeze. How did you? The authorities didn't consider the circumstances surrounding your car, but I do know what a young, enterprising inventor would do with a DeLorean. How that relates to a quirkless young man gaining flight, super speed, and super strength is the only mystery. Your hesitation shows you've got a good head on your shoulders, Midoriya-kun. Nezu laughed at Izuku, who remained silent. I'll figure out the answer on my own if you're going to keep it a secret. I'll have to take away your DeLorean in the interim. The UA property, you know. That infuriated Mei. But I succeeded, either that or it gets seized by the police, and when they examine the interior. Mei crossed her arms, backed away, and ground her teeth. All right, but when I graduate, you had better give it back to me. Izuku held up a hand and said, Is it possible for us to retain the gold? While Eraserhead arched an eyebrow, Nezu simply laughed and said, Obviously, you probably want to return to your parents in the interim. Compared to your school photos, you appear a few years older. Eraserhead had a car waiting, and with Nezu's orders, he dropped Mei off at her parents' house before driving over to Izuku's apartment. It only took one raised eyebrow from Nezu's beady-eyed face to make the attending officer gulp nervously, hurry through their paperwork, and hurry them out the front door. Oh hi mom, you just saw me this afternoon but for me it was 2 years and oh by the way I have a quirk now. Sounded way too casual a box for literal years of anxiety, homesickness, and life-threatening adventures. Izuku hesitated as he got out of the car, the apartment steps seeming so familiar yet so distant, like a half-remembered dream. He had dreamed about this moment for years. Are you going to rush it? I have a patrol coming up, and I can't in good conscience just leave you out here, Eraserhead said icily. Oh. Izuku gulped, went upstairs, and put his hand on the doorknob. After taking a deep breath, he entered the room, where Inko had the dinner table cleared away and was sitting in a chair with a severe frown on her face as she faced the door. Inko's eyes widened as she took in Izuku's taller, stockier body, his tanned skin, and his lightened hair. Izuku, what's this about you and Mei getting arrested for reckless driving and… Inko froze. Is that you? Izuku just nodded, not fighting back the tears that were streaming down his face. Inko rose from the chair and put her arms around him, saying, Izuku, baby, what happened to you? You appear to have been subjected to a quirk. It's been 2 years, Izuku said in a hoarse, trembling voice, trembling as he felt his mother's fingers slide across his back and through his hair. Chua Izuku, you just left this morning, so what are you? Quote. Time machine. Mom, Mei's creation transported us to a different planet. There were pirates, wooden ships everywhere, and practically the entire ocean. I sailed with pirates, Mom. Inko's hands froze, and she took a step back to examine him more closely. Pirates? Like a villain, do you mean? Izuku sighed. Didn't have much of a choice when their version of police officers shot at me when I first saw them. After a moment of shock, Inko said, well, at least you're home now. Yes. Oh, and I also have a quirk. Inko giggled hysterically, rolled her eyes back, and fell to the ground as soon as he showed her the lightning flickering in his hair and trailing across his arms. Izuku sighed and redirected his gaze to his mother after glancing at his hands. This is not how I imagined it. In front of a projection screen, the different government representatives who made up the HPSC assembled. When the video paused, Midoriya's face was blurry as he darted in front of an approaching truck. The presenter stated, the boys in the lab say he clocks in at about 100 kilometers an hour, based on the camera's frame rate and the distance traveled. The video quality isn't great, but with multiple sources to rely on, the margin for error is. He was interrupted by a balding official. Details are unnecessary. Tell us about this child's quirk, please. The host gave a shrug. Super speed, super strength, and what appears to be flight. Appears to be? The host pressed a button. Zooming in on Izuku's foot frame by frame, it captured the instant he suddenly kicked off. He's actually kicking off the air. It seems simple enough, a miniature version of All Might. Yes, but that still leaves us a few questions. The screen displayed two images next to each other. Midoriya's yearbook photo, which was taken roughly 2 weeks ago, is on the left. The mugshot that Musutafu police took is on the right. The individuals in the two photos appeared completely different. 2 weeks ago, Izuku had a soft face lined with baby fat, hunched shoulders, and downcast eyes. The latest image displayed a straight back, sharp eyes, and a face shaped by adversity and the weather. According to one official, Nezu figured this out already, that Rat knows something, and he's stonewalling our attempts to find out. Whatever it is, noted another politician, it, too, took Nezu by surprise. If not, why would he come running over to take him into custody? All Might was present in his civilian attire, according to Hawks. Nezu hired him this year, so that can't be a coincidence. However, what are we lacking? Is that odd car really what it is? The HPSC chairman drummed his fingers on the table. He frowned troubledly as he looked at Izuku Midoriya's twin faces. Numerous inquiries, scant details, and yet another tool in Nezu's toolbox to work against them. The chairman would not permit the Rat to erode at their influence, which it did every year. The chairman instructed them to make overtures towards the Hatsume girl, offer her a high-paying internship after reviewing Detnerot. She can tell us about the device even if she is unable to share the schematics. We can always offer Midoriya an internship through Hawks or Endeavor, but I believe we all know whose offer Midoriya will accept. The chairman allowed that silence to loom large over the room. Even with all of the HPSC's power, they were unable to defeat the country's most popular hero. They had to move quickly to keep their position because Nezu had him in his pocket and a likely successor as well. We cannot let Nezu have the boy, no matter how helpful he may be to us. Threats, bribery, blackmail, lawsuits, whatever it takes. We will either hire him or we will ruin his career before it even starts. After all, we don't really need another pillar like All Might now that All for One isn't involved. All for One scowled as he thought about what Dr. Gyudai had said. He didn't have the eyes to see the blurry video, but he had a suspicion that if he could still see, he wouldn't have a better idea of what was going on. And you are positive the child was quirkless before this mishap of theirs? Not at all. I took the test myself. The mother insisted on a complete workup, even though it could have been called on the pinky toe. They always do. And now, he can lift a truck, move at superhuman speeds, and leap into the air. In addition to All Might lurking in the background, I believe we have discovered the next one for all user. All for One thought about all he was aware of. Nezu stepped in to clear the mess after Midoriya got into legal trouble for using quirk in public. Midoriya had applied to UA, which was hiring All Might this year. The ancient villain felt as though he was missing something, even though everything was falling into place. However, it takes years of training to have that much control at such a young age. Did we actually miss it in any way? The physician shrugged. A child with that kind of quirkiness can easily go unnoticed, they're not missed. But surely he would have slipped up before now. This car, All for One said, tapping his fingers together. It teleported, you say? Yes, though it malfunctioned and left them a mile in the air. How fortunate it was that the next one for All Wielder was in there to catch it. The physician scowled. Why would they equip an experimental teleporter with the next wielder? That seems far too dangerous. Exactly. Something is missing from our situation. Something significant. What, you mean about the car? Yes. Explain every aspect of it. The physician shifted uneasily. Well, it's white. Quite long and boxy in appearance. Oh, and for some reason, the doors swing up. One twitched for all. The vehicle's make. What is it? I'm not sure. I'm not a car enthusiast. Is it a DeLorean? The physician entered data into his phone. It is. How did you find out? Everything for one suspected that few people still remembered 20th century culture, but particular films were still part of the zeitgeist as the first quirks emerged. He was uncomfortable with the thought of time travel. Had they revealed his plans after traveling to the future? Or had they gone back in time and altered the course of events? If they had tampered with time, would he even recall? Two things were clear to all for one. He needed to know which way they had gone, and he needed that machine. During the attack on UA, All for One declared, "We will have some new priorities. Don't take the DeLorean just yet. First, learn as much as you can about it. We have to surprise that rat. Couldn't we have Kurogiri take it? Too dangerous. Furthermore, All Might is no longer our target. His time is over." Everything for One said, "I'd much rather nip this new hero in the bud," as he gazed at the blurry video footage that he was unable to view. "Well, Vegapunk?" Fleet Admiral Sengoku asked. "I trust you received the footage. And the schematic, and your notes on the pirates involved." "Yes." Vegapunk gave his chin a gentle pat. "I've concluded that Hatsume and Midoriya are both from a different planet based on all the data you have gathered. They probably own a lot more land than this, based on the means of transportation their machines use and the challenges they faced when using them here." Enough. With a sigh, Sengoku took some medicine for his heart. All right. Another world that has unilateral access to ours and is technologically more developed than ours. Furthermore, the first person we know to have come here instantly joins Gold Roger. Vegapunk admonished, "Don't be so quick to judge a whole world by one individual. But they're still not going to fall into line if we come knocking." Vegapunk shrugged. "I take it you want me to make a duplicate of this machine. It won't be that simple, I'm afraid. You have the schematic. For only half of it." Vegapunk tapped the creased parchment with a finger. "And, at that, the least significant half. A simple combustion engine most definitely wasn't the source of the space-time distortion that enabled them to travel between dimensions. What do you need? Ideally, the other device. Of course, some devil fruits may be able to reproduce the effect. Bring me any that have any bearing on time or space. I've got some ideas to get the machine, and we'll get you whatever devil fruits we can. Within a week, I anticipate having a functional model of that blueprint." Harsh as usual. Think of it as completed. The snail feed on the transponder went dark. With a sigh, Sengoku leaned back and summoned Aokiji. As the Admiral strode in, the temperature in the room fell. "You rang?" Aokiji inquired. "I trust that Fire Fist Ace has been escorted to Impel Down? Locked up tighter than a ship stranded on ice. And no one knows he's currently there, correct?" Assuming the Blackbeards hadn't blabbed, yes. Sengoku balanced the threat of an unidentified, technologically advanced world that supported pirates against the threat posed by the Whitebeards. Make sure that information leaks to the Straw Hats, and have Impel Down ready to receive them. His eyes flitted to Aokiji's face. Are they really that much of a threat? They have something that we need to get our hands on at any cost. Sengoku grabbed some rice crackers from his coat and took a bite out of one. I'm willing to wager that they will try to use it to save their captain or trade it for him while they don't have it anymore. Furthermore, I don't give a damn if Whitebeard flattens Marineford or if the Straw Hats manage to get away, Aokiji. At all costs, we must obtain the device that allows us to enter other worlds.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.